Schönen guten Nachmittag. Braucht noch wer Sitzplätze da vorne? Wird es noch 2, 3 geben? No? Alles gut? Zweite Reihe links. Gut. Dann schönen Nachmittag. Good afternoon on behalf of the Architekturzentrum Wien. I would like to welcome you to today's conference, Josef Frank and the Social Dimension in Contemporary Housing. We organized this conference on the occasion of the celebration of 90 years of Vienna Werkbundsiedlung in collaboration with the Wiener Wohnbauforschung, a research department of the city of Vienna. Thanks a lot to Daniel Glaser for initiating this. The Werkbundsiedlung in Vienna, whose mastermind was Josef Frank, is one of the several efforts in architectural history to make housing more modern. As is the Weißenhof-Siedlung in Stuttgart, which is represented today with a delegation. Welcome. In the decades that followed after the Werkbundsiedlung in Vienna and in Stuttgart, modernism left us with a number of problems, from social to ecological. However, we can still learn a lot from modernism, as Josef Frank understood modernism. This is the basic assumption of today's conference. The venue of today is very close to the Werkbundsiedlung in Vienna. It's at the Villa Bear, also designed by Josef Frank together with Oskar Wlach. As always, it's really great to be in this house, which is one of my favorites, residential buildings of the modern period, and of course I'm not alone with this. And I'm very happy that the Architekturzentrum Wien is able to open this gem to visitors on selected dates in cooperation with its new owner, Lothar Trierenberg, who can't be with us, unfortunately. In the future, this house will become a public venue similar to other iconic modernist houses, such as the Villa Savoy, which I was accidentally able to visit last weekend with a tour we did with our museum's partners. We have a great and long tradition of social housing in Vienna, but the quality of housing is currently coming under pressure from several directions. By rising land and building costs, in general by the financialization of housing, by mass and speed in the fast-growing city. We urgently need social housing that responds to the climate crisis as well as the social crisis. We need housing that is flexible and can accommodate life. We need housing that does not cut us off from nature, but connects us with nature. Not only was I able to revisit Le Corbusier's Villa Savoy last weekend, but also René Gausdé's Les Étoiles d'Ivry. In the latter project makes clear how well nature and individualization can also be implemented in mass housing. And this was already in the 1960s. All the more, we should succeed in doing so in the 21st century, because there's a huge difference between the production of housing and the building of homes. This conference brings together architectural positions that show alternatives. We have great international guests who present their work, and of course we will also ask them for references to Josef Frank. Thank you so much to all of you for participating. Also, not everyone can be here today. The two curators of the conference, Lene Benz and Maria Welzig, both from the Architekturzentrum Wien, will introduce the guests in a minute. My special thanks goes to both of them, and of course, like always, to the whole team of the Architekturzentrum Wien for organizing this event. And last but not least, I wish you all a great conference, everyone here at the Villa Bear and everyone at home in front of their screens. Have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues from the network of European Werkbundestates, I would like to extend a warm welcome and in this great place in the Villa Bear. 19 years ago, from June to August 1932, the 70 houses from the Werkbundsiedlung were visited by more than 100,000 Viennese inhabitants. This year, 90 years later, another exhibition takes place in Vienna, the final presentation of the International Building Exhibition, the IBA Wien New Social Housing. This exhibition and its side events like this symposium today also meet a great public interest. This interest today and 90 years ago shows that ideas for better living or for better housing are always in demand. The Werkbund housing estates in Brno, Praha, Stuttgart, Wroclaw, Zurich and Vienna are the work of an architectural avant-garde of the 1920s and 1930s, 40s, that was internationally networked and worked together on solutions for the housing question, the main challenge, the main question in architecture in that period. Together, they pursued a common idea of housing inspired by a humanistic tradition. It was agreed that housing should serve the physical and the mental health and the self-development. The Werkbund estates, in my opinion, illustrates this holistic idea, this holistic approach, as well, of course, of many other buildings from that period too. In addition, the focus of this housing estate is not only the quality of the single building, but also the settlement as a whole. It makes clear that the common idea, the common approach defines the settlement, and the individual house subordinate themselves to this idea and make a contribution to the solving of the common task. Currently, I think we are also facing several global challenges, and what we therefore need, I think, is a common idea, a common approach that enables us to understand the challenge as a common task. That cooperation and working together across boundaries, across disciplines is crucial in order to find adequate solutions, adequate answers for this challenge. I think that the 4 upcoming lectures will show that such a common idea is perhaps this common idea is already emerging, yeah, and perhaps the ideas can serve as a guideline for the transformation of our city, of our building stock in the next 20 years. Just as housing became an architectural task in the 1920s, in future, the renovation and the further development of existing buildings and city quarters will gain in importance and become even more clearly a task of architecture. As network of European Werkbund estates, we were awarded with the European Cultural Heritage label in 2020, whereby this award does not primarily apply to the buildings of the Werkbund estates, but to the common European idea behind these estates. The common idea is therefore also the focus of our cooperation, of our work together, and as a network that connects 6 European cities with a high-standing architectural tradition. I think to emphasize this European tradition and learn more from the Werkbundsiedlung as a model of cooperation, that is our task. Thank you very much for attention, and I wish us all a very interesting evening today. And now I will pass on to Herbert Medek, my colleague from Stuttgart. He is the founder of the network and the driving force behind the network. Thank you very much for this.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues from the network, I'm very pleased to bring greetings from Stuttgart today and congratulations to the 90th anniversary of the Werkbund estate Vienna. In many cities, we bring the time back to life about 100 years ago, a time that is often described as the golden 20s or the roaring 20s, a time that promised a sense of freedom after the end of monarchies in some countries and fixed ways of life in Europe, promised freedom of lifestyle, fashion, music, equality between men and women, and also of architecture. However, only a fraction of the people could enjoy the freedom of life in these times. Most of them suffered from the problems of that time: the Spanish flu, the consequences of the First World War, mass unemployment, hyperinflation, the global economic crisis. Thousands of people poured into the cities. Affordable yet healthy housing was in short supply. This need could not be remedied with the architectural concepts of the 19th century. The Werkbund named federations that were founded in the beginning of the 20th century, in Germany in 1907, in Austria in 1912, in Switzerland in 1913, and in former Czechoslovakia in 1914, have taken on this topic. In fact, these institutions were founded with the aim of bringing together artists, architects, craftsmen, in order to achieve better quality in all design disciplines. Due to the industrial production, high quality, functionality, and material justice was not always guaranteed. The results were forward-looking impulses for building culture and design, as well as overarching social processes. A major impetus was the Stuttgart Werkbund estate on the Waisenhof estate. Here in 1927, under the direction of Ludwig Mies van der Rohe, 17 architects from 5 European countries built 21 houses in the new objectivity style, later named the International Modernity style. One of these architects came from Vienna. His name was Josef Frank. Josef Frank differed from some of the revolutionary architects who met at the Waisenhof. He was not an utopian like Le Corbusier, for example, who is represented by 2 buildings at the Waisenhof. Josef Frank said at the time, you shouldn't invent a new style every year, and you shouldn't have cravings for the style of your neighbor. Man is not a flash in the pan. Josef Frank was also not a friend of pre-produced components. A house or an apartment cannot be mass-produced like a light bulb or a telephone or an automobile. Automobile can definitely be understood as a dig at Le Corbusier, who saw the apartment as a functioning machine, for example, in his Citroën-type named house on the Waisenhof. Josef Frank said, the apartment is the negative of the human being and has a spiritual function. It is more than a shelter against the rain. So short note typify, that is a matter for the industry, not the architect. Types arise by themselves when their usefulness has been proven. The architect is not a paragraph writer, but an artist. So Josef Frank was against the radical ideas of early modernist architects. Le Corbusier shocked the world. Josef Frank spread Viennese charm with a bite. He wanted a viable modern age. His semi-detached house in Stuttgart was almost provocatively conservative. Outside an off-white, inside a colorful patterned color scheme in upholstered sofas, armchairs, chairs, cushions, skin and carpets. This also instead of rationalism that was part of his understanding of modernity. He used his own furniture designs from his company House and Garden in Vienna, which he had founded in 1925 with Oskar Wlach and Walter Sobotka. However, Josef Frank was not a traditionalist. He supported modern individuality, human orientation, and an unpathetic simplicity. In Stuttgart, he presented himself as a visionary. One of the most important social and political questions today is the question of a sustainable energy source. Josef Frank dealt with this topic almost 100 years ago. What to do when no more solid fuels such as wood or coal are available? What is the best form of energy? In 1927, the question arose, gas or electricity? Josef Frank set up the right half of the semi-detached house as a so-called gas house. Gas heating, gas stove, gas lamps, gas washing machine, and gas iron. The left half was operated entirely electrically, so with electric heating, electric stove, lamps, washing machine, and iron. Let's have a look inside. Here is the electric house, living room. And here's the gas house, living room. On the left side, the electric kitchen. Right side, the gas kitchen. And in the cellar, washing machine with gas on the here on the right side. And the iron with gas. What did it turn out to be? Ultimately, some compromise won out. Heating and stove with gas, the rest electric. But that's not the issue either. The fact that he already thought about this topic almost 100 years ago is proof of how future-oriented and sustainable Josef Frank and his colleagues already planned back then. Josef Frank saw his experiences in Stuttgart as an impulse to initiate a modernist estate in Vienna, the Vienna Werkbund estate, whose 90th anniversary we are celebrating this year. Together with Wrocław, Brno, Prague, Stuttgart, of course, and Zurich. The Vienna estate is part of a network that we founded in 2013. It's an European story, the story of developing modern architecture and housing estates built all over Europe in the 1920s-30s from modern architects. The estates had different developments because of political situations, for example in Germany, the National Socialism. Later they've been separated through the Iron Curtain between West and East Europe. Since 30 years they are reunited after falling off the Iron Curtain, and since 2013 reconvened together in a network to interchange experiences in building, restoring, teaching and learning, documentation and tourism. Our network had his first public appearance in a large exhibition in Wrocław 2016. 2019, our network was awarded the European Heritage Label. We got it 1 year later. We have not yet been able to celebrate this success due to the pandemic. We, my colleagues from the other network cities and I, are all the more pleased to have 2 reasons to celebrate at our annual conference, the European Heritage Label and the 90th anniversary of the Vienna Werkbundsiedlung. So I wish this symposium very success in this impressive Villa Bear, designed by Josef Frank, an architect who is well known to us from Stuttgart. Thank you very much.
Dear guests, dear audience, also from my side of the curatorial team and organizational team, I'm very pleased that you have accepted our invitation and to welcome you in this unique location of the Villa Bear, planned, as mentioned, in 1929 by Josef Frank and Oskar Wlach. Every time when I get here, I'm uplifted by this spatial experience that offers such a rich generosity as well as thank you, humble simplicity. And still I ask myself, why is this kind of architecture so rare in our culture? In the context of today's symposium, we want to present contemporary and internationally acclaimed examples of modern, socially and ecologically engaged housing and community projects that pursue similar principles as Josef Frank and provide inspiration for residential buildings and neighborhoods in Vienna. Before we start with the introduction and the lectures, I would like to express our sincere gratitude to our colleagues of the Architekturzentrum Wien who helped us by making this event possible. Maria Welzig and I want to thank Philipp Aschenberger and his team from the workshop, Dietlinde Neubart and Christian Schwarz and their team for the coordination of catering and setup, Oliver Schmid, Jan and Street Agency for the technical support, Sarah Oxtol and Maria Falkner for the administration and travel organization. Furthermore, we would like to thank our friends from Rita Brinks who care for the excellent food and drink today. And last but not least, I can see you, Katharina Maginter from Das Büro, which coordinates the location Villa Bear. Thank you very much and a big applause. Now I hand over to my colleague Maria Welzig, who is an expert on the architect Josef Frank and will introduce you to the subject of today's symposium. Thank you.
Herzlich willkommen und guten Abend. I would just like to add 2 more names to Lene's thanks, Daniel Glaser and Bojan Schnabel, who were already mentioned, but that's important to name them also. Let me give you an introduction to what the idea of this symposium is and to who Josef Frank was. But Herbert Medeck already brought it very much to the point, I think. Thank you very much for things that we have not known about Josef Frank actually, and the connection to today's challenges. That was really cool. You can experience Frank's architectural thinking very well in this house. It is one of the important residential buildings of the modernism, and what we experienced with the many, many visitors who almost stormed this house, it is an architecture that touches people. because how space affects a person psychologically was a core question to Frank. Frank's central interest was the issue of housing, of social housing. And he made no principal distinction between concepts for people with money and for the non-affluent. This social attitude can also be seen in the Villa Bea. Frank, as you have seen perhaps during the guided tour today, Frank designed the rooms for the house staff according to the same principles in small size and down to the details in the same way as the rooms for the clients. Also on the outside, you cannot tell which one is the service entrance and which one is the entrance of the clients. Josef Frank was an architect, activist, and intellectual. He was part of a circle of sociologists, economists, physicists, and philosophers, famously known as the Vienna Circle, Wiener Kreis. In addition, Frank had an extensive historical knowledge and an almost global cultural knowledge. This broad view of contexts put many things into perspective for Frank, hat viele Dinge relativiert. Everything dogmatic and authoritarian was a no-go for him. Freedom is a key concept for Frank. His architectural designs are based on structure and mathematical clarity. You see here the tracé régulateur from the facade of Villa Bea, for example. Another side of his nature can be seen in his free, playful way of drawing. Nature and architecture merge into one another. The same spirit radiates his fabric designs. Some colleagues of the international style wanted to excommunicate him for using such fabrics, as Herbert Medeck also has mentioned. Frank was a driving force of the Austrian settlement movement. In that period of total lack of everything after World War I, people organized themselves as cooperatives to build simple houses with gardens, largely with their own hands. This is a settlement by Josef Frank from the beginning of the 20s in Vienna. The houses were owned in the form of building lease and the plots of land, but the plots of land remained in public ownership. So also an important model for today. Josef Frank created an architectural role model for the settlement estates, like here, for example. The simple row houses in his designs are all equal and typified, so this is a point of discussion, perhaps also, Josef Frank's attitude towards typification. But there is no schematism and variations are possible. Also, new technologies and materials were always welcome to Frank, but as a means, not as an end. The layout of his settlements is clearly structured, but never rigid. In the layout, there is no hierarchy and no romanticism, nor village-like nostalgia. And it's more, you see the houses are very homogeneous and simple, and you see also in these two designs that nature becomes an element of revitalization in both projects. All settlements had a rich offer of community facilities. The focus of the settlement house was as Frank designed it, was no longer on the facade, but on the question of how best to live. This meant a main orientation towards the garden, a direct connection between living space and garden, the eat-in kitchen, Wohnküche, that was new too, and also the use of flat roofs as terraces. That was also an element Josef Frank brought into the settlements. This workers' settlement in Lower Austria, Niederösterreich, which Frank planned in 1919, was built with really minimal resources. But what was afforded, however, was an own garden architect for the workers' settlement. So this is really remarkable and shows where the focus is. The settlement movement in Vienna received enormous popularity after the First World War. However, their autonomy and self-determination seemed kind of dangerous in the eyes of the city government. So this grassroots democratic experiment more or less was ended after a few years. With the Werkbund estate in Vienna, Josef Frank wanted to revive the spirit of the settlement movement a few years later. And he tried to establish a modern alternative to the more fortress-like housing superblocks of the somehow paternalistic Red Vienna. Frank had originally planned the Werkbund estate in Vienna quite differently, with an open layout and mixed typology, including multi-story housing. The Werkbundsiedlung was originally also planned for a much more central location in the city. But then the whole project was moved to the end of the city, as you have seen today also. It was now realized without multi-story housing and more for the middle class than for the working class. So it kind of lost a bit of his relevance, the relevance Josef Frank had intended. We have picked out 5 aspects of Frank's architectural thinking that seem particularly productive for today. And we have invited 4 international architects in whose work these aspects are implemented according to today's conditions, without any direct contact to Josef Frank, except for Katharina Urbanek. Aspect 1, the inhabitant must in no case have the feeling of being just a number. So it's all quotes by Josef Frank. The conference ties in with this core statement. Frank considered it authoritarian to, and I quote, force all people into a large homogeneous mass. For him, the home was a stage for the development of one's personality. You named it spiritual aspect of the home. Thank you for that. With Christophe Hutin, one of our lecturers, it sounds similar when he says, I quote, Christophe, today the inhabitant is the last link in the production chain. The idea is to put people back at the heart of the manufacturing processes of architecture and urban planning. So, end of the quote. The focus of current urban development is on high densities, behind which the qualities of dwelling meant by Frank must take a backseat. And if there is discourse, it focuses rather on ground floor zones for public and community use. Aspect 2, forward to nature. For Frank, the most important part of the settlement house is the garden, or the green outdoor room. He said gardens, terraces, outdoor sleeping facilities, which I like especially, were essential elements in housing for all. 100 years ago, the garden of the settlement house offered the opportunity to grow one's own crops, to be partially self-sufficient. This aspect is gaining importance again today. Architect Doan Thanh Ha, whom we welcome warmly from Hanoi, Vietnam, brings together nature and architecture in a very close relationship, and he has investigated also the possibilities of combining food cultivation and housing architecture. The housing debates in the era of the settlement and self-sufficiency movement 100 years ago were also about new eating habits. So people's mental and physical health were part of the housing discussion. There were gardening training courses at that time. The individual was involved, learned something, produced something, experienced herself as self-effective and in resonance with the always changing nature. These psychological aspects of the garden were even more important to Frank than the purely utilitarian aspect. He noted longing for closer contact with nature as a counterweight to the pressing demands of the mechanized civilization. That was 100 years ago. Frank also recognized, I quote, that the closeness to nature will have a decisive effect on the neighborly relationship of the inhabitants. Indeed, community green spaces have a high social and communitarian potential. In today's housing, the function of community places is often supposed to be taken over by the circulation zones. However, according to current fire protection regulations, these zones may neither be furnished nor planted, and thus often cannot fulfill this function. The architectural Grand Huit from Paris, whom we will welcome later, virtually, show in their project La Ferme du Réel the high activist and communicative potential of green space and of gardening in the city. Aspect 3, beyond measuring housing only in square meters, Frank was concerned with spatial qualities and subjective spatial experience, so loft living, rooftop-like spaces, different room heights and different floor levels were elements for him. And Frank stated, the basis of our modern architecture is the Japanese house, built of wood with its sliding walls, ephemeral and light, movable and transparent. Experiencing space in motion and inviting people to move through space, this is one of Frank's special talents as an architect. Movement in space is also taken into account by Katharina Urbanek, whom we welcome here as a speaker. This applies even to her small-scale residential projects. On a large scale, in a collaborative building group project she planned together with Eda Krenn architects. The many community spaces, they flow like a continuous architectural promenade through the house, through the building block, meandering between indoor and outdoor. Aspect 4, it's a question. How can the qualities of living in one's own house with a garden, which is after all what many people want, how can it be produced in a dense urban form? For Frank and his circle in the settlement movement, one answer was the stepped terrace house. Basically, the question of how to create the qualities of a garden house in a dense city has been one of the topics of the 20th century, not of the 21st, I think. This is a stepped terraced house realized in Vienna in the 70s. However, the densified low-rise housing estates, the settlements of Frank and his successors, are very much still relevant. Namely in the countryside and on the periphery. There they could help to prevent the urban sprawl due to single-family houses. Roland Reiner, Puchenau, Garden City, Puchenau. 5. The fundamental changes in our living and traffic situation in the last 50 years has had a particularly serious effect on one group, children. Yet they still play almost no role in urban development. And unfortunately, children play almost no role in the intellectual discourse either. For this topic too, Josef Frank is an inspiration. This is a kindergarten built by him. And this is his design for the main square of the settlement, of a settlement Ortmann in Niederösterreich. And no municipal office, no religious building, no cultural building is located at the prominent front of the main square. It is a kindergarten. The square itself consists of playgrounds and gardens. And this is the room that Frank, at the beginning of the 20s, when there was also no money, which he offered to poor children. Yeah, he had all his elements in it. You also have a promenade between indoor and outdoor, a roof terrace, And I think it shows a lot of respect to the small people. Children are apparently not a worthwhile target group for political decision makers, as also the years of the pandemic have shown. But if an environment is good for children, it is good for everyone. We are now looking forward to the speakers who will show how the aspects addressed could be interpreted and implemented today, so that we can profit twice, on the one hand from a survey of Josef Frank, and on the other hand from excellent contemporary examples. Thank you.
Our first guest today is Clara Simay from the French cooperative Grand Huit. The office got recently very famous as it received several recognitions for their project La Femme du Rail, emerged in collaboration with landscape planner Melanie Trevet. It was also one of the finalists of the Mies van der Rohe Award 2022 and is therefore part of the upcoming exhibition Europas Beste Bauten, which you can visit from the 6th of October at the Architekturzentrum Wien, and to which you are hereby warmly invited. Grand Huit is a cooperative in which experts in architecture, landscape architecture, and urban research work together to find new forms of living, economic activity, and social work. La Femme du Rail is located on the edge of a former railway, and it includes urban agriculture, a restaurant, a grocery store, and social housing units for homeless people and students. We are very pleased to welcome Clara Simay, who unfortunately cannot be here in person, but she sent us her lecture as a video presentation, which we start now. And after this presentation, she is connected to us virtually and available for any questions from the audience. Now. Yes.
And please forgive me for not being able to join you today. Let me introduce also our studio. We are architects and activists on sustainability issues and social issues also. We founded the Grand Huit Cooperative in 2018, which brings architects, landscape designers, and urban philosophers together. Our practice is strongly rooted in the less affluent districts of Eastern Paris, one of which has also been my home for the last 25 years. With material resources collected locally and cooperations with the inhabitants and the economic actors of ecological transition, we try to reimagine places where populations and programs can coexist. We work on programs such as social housing, craftsmanship workshops, urban agriculture sites, and cultural centers, etc., where other ways of living can be experimented, invented, always with respect for nature and people. I would like to thank the architecture Zentrum and the curators for giving me the opportunity to think about the bridges we can build between the work of Josef Frank and our contemporary practices. This opportunity allows us to realize the resonances with his work and how the topics that run through it has been precisely the common ground in all aspects of our work at Grand Vite, and in particular his approach of urban community and the major role that nature plays in its cohesion, the central place also he gave to the inhabitants, and is in his urban design is concerned to reconcile the urban density of the metropolises with social well-being, and how it is the duty of the architects to fight and always negotiate for giving places to fertile soil. And now to illustrate this approach through a collective lived place, I would like to share with you our 6-year life project, Fenster, which has been open to the public since 2019, but has been in development since 2014. The Fenster is a neighborhood solidarity location where market gardening techniques are employed to valorize the collected organic waste. This project offers an urban agriculture model that which has its roots in the local ecosystem. You can see here the many shared gardens we have in our neighborhood. It is located on the edge of the Petite Ceinture, an obsolete railway track that encloses Paris. It offers, the place offers 5 students and 15 persons in need accommodation, also a public open restaurant and agricultural work locations such as a productive greenhouse, a mushroom growing cave, and everywhere permaculture gardens, including facades, balconies, and rooftops. 2 buildings open their arms to the visitors and set up around a large inner city productive market garden. Beyond this central garden, there is the first building, which is which is a 3-story timber block housing for the garden's urban farmers and the students. And to his left, the second building begins with a ground floor bicycle garage and garden maintenance machinery storage. On the floor above, the restaurant and its terrace are linked to the former railway, which is today a promenade. And at the top level of this building, there is the greenhouse. The buildings and the garden are the eco-designed fruit of shared governance between a large consortium of stakeholders, operators, architects, landscapers, and project managers, social employment and enterprises, housing associations, etc. These social enterprises, organizations tasked with creating jobs and supporting inclusion. The social agency stakeholders introduced and supported the homeless involved both before and once they eventually moved into the housing block. An active neighborhood consultation was organized, and that allows complete residents integration into the adventure. during all the design and construction period, 3 pillars of the sustainable development were aimed: ecology, economy, and social. You can see the plan where you see the gardens, 2 buildings, and the main market garden in the center, and also the path to the former railway, Petite Ceinture, the terrace first, and then the Petite Ceinture. Here you can see the work on the soil at the beginning, before the work we did with collected organic wastes in the neighborhood to rebuild the soil that were polluted. And the construction time was also an opportunity to extend the project educational and social vocation by training people experiencing inclusion. The building were designed and as eco-materials implement learning ground, mainly wooden structure and straw insulation. And the circular economy was also illustrated by the reused materials. Even the construction field itself was special from the start, and it featured the inclusion of environment conscious construction contractors using bio-sourced materials to be coherent with the farming activity. For example, we used bundles of straw because they are efficient for the insulation, adapted to a low-skilled workforce. And since there is a lot of it in the surrounding Paris, we could manage to reduce transportation pollution. Our metropolises is long since lost the links that connected them to the countryside. Collecting the material directly from the farm's fields, paying him an income without any intermediary, is also a commitment to rebuild these bonds, to rebuild the urban metabolism, and to create territorial solidarity. You see the straw going to the walls, and a nice moment on the work site, which were really important. The different kind of people we had on the work. We also developed the circular economy and the practice of reuse through many experimentations, such as recycled textile insulation, reclaimed bathroom tiles. You can see here. Also with the work with the wood coming from fashion weeks to make the furnitures into the rooms of the farmers, and work with also obsolete stones walls into the garden coming from the streets. And to make the floors of the garden, wooden window frames transformed into planters, and also in pocket floors. And the key words, and this is a recycle textile insulation to make here the solar protections of the restaurants. The keywords here are frugality, low-tech devices, but also robustness, due to the collective and social purpose of the place. Mainly, the project defended model of sustainability and sustainable and social economy linked to the interdependence between the project actors and the inhabitants. It is based on each person's skills, led to reinforce each other for the neighborhood benefits. The stakeholders are not the foremost experts in their field, but they have a fine knowledge of their neighborhood, its resources, and its real issues. So these skills are really useful to the project here and now. It is this local anchoring that allowed the project to be born despite many obstacles and a long gestation period. The farm activities are organized into local and territorial exchange networks. The farmers offer the district inhabitants a set of services, collection and treatment of local organic waste or unsold goods, market gardening, of course, small plant markets, as well as maintenance service for green spaces in the private gardens around. It is also a place of awareness that responds to the urgent needs for meeting and discussions around nature in the city and alternative food system. It is born from the local residents and associations' desire to build a place that combines urban agriculture and solidarity. And the farm aims to integrate vulnerable people and give them a place and an actual address into the city center, into the dense city. It is part of the neighborhood social fabric by generating agricultural services, by creating jobs, and by offering an open to all conviviality and sharing places. It develops short circuit market gardening activity, which allows the training to its residents. It involves around a community of persons and on an integration path and horticulture students. These students live here for a year or two, running agricultural experimentations alongside the other residents. In addition to housing and working spaces, there is also the restaurants. You can see it is the collected organic waste, the gardens. I want to show you the restaurant. This is the level of the restaurant. There is also this restaurant adjacent to the living units. Of course, a part of the food comes directly from the farm gardens, and not only does it function as a canteen for those who live and work here, but it is also open to the public at affordable prices. In terms of production, the farming principles is principally permacultural and integrating agroforestry, aquaponic techniques, and sack of culture on the rooftops and balconies over a total of 1,700 square meters of cultivated surfaces on 1,300 square meters patch of land, which is really dense, as you can hear. Given the presence of city pollution, the farm doesn't claim the food is completely organic, though no chemical, of course, additives are used. Fetal filtration basin treats all rainwater runoff from the two buildings into an underground tank until needed for the garden. Sitting high above, yet fully integrated into the garden, it is the unheated greenhouse. This is the roof. And sorry, I'm looking for the greenhouse. Yeah. The greenhouse, sorry, I lost my, is a knitted greenhouse, which allows for variation of the production, the preparation for the seedlings, and the production of the most delicate sprouts. Together, the production, the produce contributes about 1/3 of ingredients needed for the restaurant, which is not so bad. Completing the ecosystem, the compost sediments area is housed close to the entrance tunnel, as you saw just before, to accommodate the voluntary contribution of organic waste by local residents. By putting together many of the topics related to environmental and social awareness in the urban context, the farm accompanies the homeless people through a path that can give them the chance to have stable jobs. These people collect organic waste from about 30 restaurants in the area by bicycle, and they also composted at the farm. Compost was also necessary, as I told you here, because the soil in this area, as well as many urban plots in the metropolis, was polluted at the original site was a neighborhood garage that spilled hydrocarbons into the ground. Since this patch of land was not suitable for agriculture, we had to level the most polluted volumes, insulating the ground underneath, and lay a substrate using compost mixed with the few unpolluted land of the site. This circular process was activated even before starting work, using waste from the city to create a rich and fertile soil. With the farmer ecosystem, we intend to demonstrate that we can minimize energy, food, and financial resources needs, as well as the carbon impacts by implementing a local circular economy. We can see the last pictures of the life into the farm. And I finish here. If you have questions, I'd be very pleased, if the connection allows it, to answer to your questions. And thank you again for having me. I wish you a pleasant and a very an amazing symposium. Thank you, everybody.
So now we try to connect with Clara Semay in Paris, and she should be online. Yes, she is there. Hello, Clara.
Hello.
Hello. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Perfect. Then maybe we give her another applause for your presentation.
Good afternoon, everybody. Pleased to be able to be with you.
Yes, we are very happy that you have.
Please for the questions.
Yeah, maybe I start with with my first question I have, I'm wondering, how was it possible to realize this kind of project in such a context, like in such an expensive city as Paris? It's just, how did it all start?
The main things we had, the main asset we had here was our local location. We know we live here, we work here, and we know a lot of professionals and also inhabitants. So when we need to have the right skills at the right place, we know where to go, where to ask, and plus we had the support of the stakeholders, the mayor and the city hall, which is an important part also in that case. And also we had we didn't have the places rent, because the city allowed us to rent it and not to buy it, which was the first proposition into this competition. Because of our social impacts, they agreed to of this arrangement. That's why also we could do this into a dense metropolis. Also the dense city and the dense metropolis are the opportunity, a real opportunity, because of their concentration of skills and competences, as I told you, and also because the provision of leftover quality materials that can be reused without taking anything from the natural environment, and is real into our dense city, and it's also the opportunity to stop our predatory behavior.
Yeah, now I would like to ask the audience if there are any questions. Yeah? My colleague is coming. It's really ganz hinten.
When did you start this? It was apparently started in some springtime, but was it this year or the previous?
When did the project start? In what year?
You mean the work?
The gardening.
The gardening.
The gardening. It was spring. No, I'm sorry. The housing part opened in January, and so the first residents and farmers arrived on the site in January. So they had the whole spring to build, to finish the gardens, and so the first season was really it was profusions of production and of vegetables and plants on the first year. Also because we prepared the soil during the two previous years with composting.
Mm-hmm. And how did you get through this hot summer this year?
We were okay, actually, because there is all the time people to take care of the place, as our residents and farmers. They don't often go on vacation out of their residence, because they used to be homeless. They have a home and the place. So there is constantly someone to take care of the plants. We had no problem with water because of the collect of rainwater during all the winter, so we were okay.
Okay. Are there some more questions? Yeah, over there.
This is very impressive, this whole project. I could imagine that you did inspire other people. Did you?
The first je sais pas comment on dit, excusez-moi. The first influence, yes, we had, it was in the neighborhood, actually. The inhabitants all around now often come to the restaurants. They love it. They often meet their friends here. There is also a meeting for the professional here, and we are very very glad of that. And in France, we had few awards because of this. It wasn't the most beautiful building of the year, but now things are changing. We can see that because there is, as we had plus with the Miss Van der award, there is people want to congratulate, welcome the project with a social purpose. So this is also what we heard.
More questions? Okay, then you? Yeah, okay, Maria.
The stupid question always, but how did you finance it?
No, it's not stupid at all. There is, in our team, our little team, someone, Frédéric Lopretre, was the money man. And his job was to collect through many foundations, also public and private organization, the money, and to talk with banks and all that stuff. He did an amazing job for this, and this is how we were able to found the funds for the invest.
Yeah, maybe another question from my side. How is it possible to include nature in architecture projects, especially for future projects, such in a dense city as Paris? How is it possible to really include nature as an aspect in architecture?
We now have a lot of technical answer, very technological answer to integrate nature into the buildings, and we're not convinced with these solutions. We're more like low-tech devices to integrate it, and we prefer to give the privilege to the human action, and the fact that the people here, they live here, they take care of their own environments, and so they take care of the living human and the non-human also. And for us, we can no longer conceive and design our building without taking into account this question of sharing of environments between living humans and non-humans. We couldn't do it another way. Urban agriculture, which implies that the person takes care of the soil and its fertile regeneration can be an answer, of course, as we propose here, but the condition remains, however, not to make greenwashing and to integrate it into a local economy of sharing, of exchange, local exchanges.
Okay. So if there are no more questions from your side, I would suggest to continue with our program. Clara, thank you very much for taking time for this conversation. And yeah, say hello to your team. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so now my colleague Maria Welzig will introduce you our next guest.
Josef Frank's first commission had been the exhibition design of an East Asian museum. It was the first East Asian museum on the European continent in 1912. The culture and philosophy of East Asia from then on formed the cornerstone of Frank's thinking. In keeping with Frank's openness, this event goes beyond a purely European perspective. We are very happy to welcome Doan Thanh Ha, founder of H&P Architects, who came from Hanoi, Vietnam, to be with us today. H&P Architects rediscovered kind of natural and local building materials and simple building for Vietnamese architecture. The office developed modular, temporary self-built houses for people who lost their homes due to flood catastrophes or other natural catastrophes. H&P Architects also introduced the typology of step terrace houses, and they experiment with the connection between architecture and agriculture. They built also very beautiful community places for poor areas, very simply built, but with a rich space. A fascinating fluidity between inside and outside, between building and plants, characterized the work of H&P Architects. And Doan brought us also a book that he published recently, or almost, I think last month. If you want, you can also have a look inside. Doan Thanh Ha understands English, but he doesn't feel comfortable to speak it. So we welcome also Phit Phuong, originally from Hanoi, who studied architecture at the Technical University in Vienna. Last year, she had a design course about Josef Frank, accidentally. Now she works as an architect in Vienna. Phit Phuong will co-present Doan's lecture, and she will also be present in the discussion. Doan and Phit, please come to the stage.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người. Tôi là Đoàn Thanh Hà, đến từ H&P Architect ở một cái văn phòng nhỏ ở Việt Nam. Bên cạnh tôi là bạn Phương, bạn ấy sẽ chuyển ngữ cái bài nói chuyện sắp tới. Thì chúng tôi xin phép được bắt đầu cái bài nói chuyện của mình với chủ đề là hòa mình với tự nhiên.
Hello everyone, on behalf for Mr. Doan, so I'm so glad to be here today to present his architecture for you, and it's also really an honor for him to be here to really talk about the Vietnamese architecture. And yeah, so he's so glad to be here today in Vienna to talk with everyone about one of his philosophy in architecture design, together with nature, and together with him. So we will start our presentations. In these illusions, you can see the three circles about the heaven, earth, and the social. The social is about the humanity. The moment when Mr. Duan got the invitations, he was curious and integral with the radical architecture philosophy of Josef Frank from centuries ago, which is still keeping up with the time so far, especially his thoughts of forward to nature in 1924, which is also the main topic of the lecture today. In the whole time of his career, the Mr. Duan's career, he always considered nature as an essence in architecture. Based on that, people would approach towards one true self. In the classical Eastern culture, there is a theory referred to the three realms: the heaven, the earth, and the humanity, which is here the social. That is correspondence in the general structure of the world, in which man living in the order of nature, in the thoughts of the harmony amongst the universe, the earth, and the people. In East Asia, we have a really strong culture of really like thinking how we could be able to communicate with the God, and it's bring a lot of the philosophy into the architecture and into the way how we design the space to live. Thought living in an infinite universe, man is not supposed to live like a hero. As in Vietnam, we say đầu đội trời chân đạp đất. It's like the head touches to the sky and the feet standing on the ground. But survival consents to the law of the nature, giving prominence to the idea by heaven, the favorite able venue by the earth, and the harmony of the human. In German would say zur richtigen Zeit, am richtigen Ort und auch mit richtigen Personen. And nowadays, it's not only just in Vietnam, but it's all over the world. We are facing so many problems in the super negative situations. As in the Tien, is the word in Vietnamese for heaven, which is referred to the elements of air. Strong impact of climate change. Địa as the earth, which is referred to the elements of earth. Pollutions of environment and complicated situations, so many medical pandemics such as like COVID-19 nowadays. Nhân, the humanity, which is referred to the human factor, the polarizations, the well distribution of the society. Architecture plays an intermediary role connecting human and nature. Is the realizations of the strong relationship between human and the cultural complexity of the society. He was always thinking about the material, the structure when he designed the house, in the way of focusing in eco-friendly material, artificial structure in the natural ways. So what is eco-friendly material for Mr. Duan? It is like the natural material from the clay, lime, stone, wood, manufactured for products originating to the nature resources like a different type of brick, the MDF, or reusable component like pad or scaffolding. And here is some example for all the mentions category are about. The first one is the blooming bamboo home, which is made out just from the bamboo. Is one of the very common material in Vietnam to build a house, especially when we was by the time that you're already building the Werkbundsiedlung in 1920, we're still having lime and the clay mixed with the dry leaf. And use the bamboo to make the wall, which is like make a really nice material for to solve the problem with the high humidity in Vietnam, especially in the spring. The second one is the tire nest in Hanoi, which is built basically out from the brick and also the left tiled. In this house, we use a lot of recycled material. And the third one is a properly breathing house in Hanoi. We have a really cool names. It's like properly breathing house. It's like for Mr. Duan, a house is also like a living being. A house could also breathing, and also it show a really characterized tropical architecture that we really need a house which could be able to have amazing Luftung inside, which could solve a lot of problem in the tropical land. So here he want to shows one of his thinking about shaping structure as naturally as possible, coordinating with natural, reproducing nature, or imitating nature. Một cách tự nhiên, so learning from the nature structure and a molecular biology. Analogized to human act as role as an organic element in the nature, intimating from nature's forms, like substance of the color, coordinating with nature, like adapting the natural conditions of the space, replicating the nature throughout the impressions, feeling about the normal peculiarities, relationship improvement, and the profound continuations of the regular component. And here are some examples for the mentioning natural connections of the house. The nature-based architecture likewise assists with constructions, maintaining cost, long-term concurrence with unfavorable factors, and minimize the risk and damage caused by natural disaster. The first one is the terrace house in Ha Tinh, was built in 2025. In this house, he tried to use the skylight as one of the components at the part of the house, to be able to create an amazing the airflow. Yeah, create the airflow. Also combined with the layout of the window all along the facade. The second one is a tropical cave in Buckning, is where he's from, which is built in 1919. In this house, he's focusing on using the brick material matching with the wooden to really bringing the sunlight inside the house to create amazing shadows effect inside the house. And the third one is the brick cave. This one is one of his one of the most characterized architecture of him, which is using the brick as a main material. And here he was invented the dual facade with the brick facade to solve a lot of the airflow conditions inside the house. So social dimensions in the house. The first house he wants to show to everyone is the blooming bamboo home in Hanoi, was built in 2019. The house is like a flower for people who are living in the area, carrying the risk of disaster, flood, earthquakes, and thaws, and they make of bamboo, anuga bamboo. This house, not only just having the structure, which could be able to solve all the disaster, weather, climate disaster, but also having behind a huge philosophy of the culture. Bamboo is one of the material that we call as strong as the mind of the Vietnamese people. As we know, that is 40 years ago, we was in the really hard war. And at this time, people used bamboo to fight back to a really modern weapon of the French colony. But because of that, we used every time that when the Vietnamese people talking about bamboo, we want to talk about like how strong Vietnamese people was to really like go through the wartime. The second one is the properly breathing house. In the diagram, you could see like he was using different void by stacking the floor plans to make the amazing airflow. It's not only just in the vertical way, but in the zigzag vertical way to make the air run from the ground floor to the top floor. And not only just by this, with the facade made by recycled tire and a lot of hold on the facade is create also the shadow to create the shadows to make the house inside much cooler. And here he has a philosophy like a house which can breathe, is in accordance with its specific natural environment, culture, climate around, with an exterior shelf made the bottom side of reusable floor tiles. The third one is the terrace home in Ha Tinh was built in 2015. Here, he wants to say that the house has got the inspirations from the terrace view, which is like really famous on every photo that every time when the people are searching for the picture from Vietnam, from Philippines, from Thailand, which is like really characterized from East Asia, is a combination of architecture with culture that you can see here that on every terrace. They have different type of garden. Indoor agriculture, flexibilities for an urban approaching toward to the nature, to the countryside lifestyle, and bringing out the connection to their hometown. This house is the Agri Nester. The Agri Nester is like a lump of clay got tucked from the few containing inside the nooks and crannies of the nest. Or it could be understood as the pit underground of the coal mine in Mao He. Mao He is a small city in the Buckning province, which is really well known with the coal mine everywhere in this province. The houses encourage the movement of shifting farmland to the urban life inside the house, bringing ecological benefits to the community in the vulnerable areas. The material here is the brick dual facade, exactly like the brick house that we showed before. And now is a brick cave, which is I mentioned before about the dual brick facade that he invented. The house has a structure similar to a cave with the vegetations, plant farming on the roof, alternating between the two layers of the brick wall. This buffer zone plays the role as an air filter, converting the space from private, semi-private, and open space in the comparison to the architecture in the cold country like in Austria. We could say like instead of using Wärmedämmung, we have our loop shakes to be able to solve all the air, all the humidity, airflow problem inside the interior space. And here is the tropical cave in Buckning, which is built in 2019. This house has a skylight from the ground floor to the fifth floor, create a visual effect of the small dance in the tropic with the vegetations alternate itself back and forward, down and upwards. The facade is made of wood and tree with exposed brick. Together with nature is the topic that we said from the beginning. So what is the together with nature? The house, we just should have maybe the transition, maybe the vegetation, and maybe the void. Or maybe we have to have everything inside. And how Mr. Duan had been trying to find the way how to combine everything all together. From all those examples above, we could see that to be able to get the harmony in the living atmosphere, a house should have the transition area to create a specific apertures of the space, fade out the boundary of inside, outside, up and down, transition of private and common, vegetations alternate between the space, create the feeling of being close to nature and giving back the greenery which is architecture was taken to be exist. Architecture for people, kiến trúc vì nhân sinh, is one of the major philosophy that he had been seeking the whole his life. This philosophy is about the responsibility of architecture to social culture and nature. In this illusion is the Maslow hierarchy of need. It shows up the different case of architecture space, which is he considered as the essential space to supply all the residents' utilities. Mr. Doan concerned the most about the three levels from the bottom up of the Maslow diagram, the philosophical imperative, welfare need, and social need. Based on those points, is correlates to many perspectives of architecture, educational, medical care to architecture, also small and friendly housing module. The first point we would love to mention here is the welfare needs. To explain for this point of view, we would love to talk about the example of different housing projects, modular, prefabricated house is the topic of the series project, which is targeting to supply the welfare need for a group of vulnerable residents in Vietnam. The common sense of those houses is they are all two-floored houses on a small square floor plans. It's from 36 meters square to 49 meters square, saving as much as the land or water surface in case of the floating house. Three characters of those houses is easy to build, flexible, low cost, diverse material is a bamboo, dry leaf, particle bamboo, wood, and so on. So the first project is the Agri Nester that we mentioned before already. On the plan of the house, we could see that the house had many different voices to fulfill over the time, follow the use of the owner. The old furniture is reused and recycled. The windows are fulfilled with plans which are already decided. The structure of the house is mainly made of raw material. Here we can see the raw concrete walls, floor, and 2 layers of brick wall. In this rendering, we want to show an ambition for a far side about an agglomerations where agriculture on the rooftop is encouraged and developed. After all those projects with the perspective of bringing nature back into the living space, we also have another question: how architecture could help human dealing with the climate disaster? And here is one of the most remarkable projects of him in the last 2 years, is the floating bamboo house. This house was exhibited in Leo Museum of Art in South Korea, and the exhibition will last until 8th of January in 2023. This project was first made in Quốc Oai, Hanoi. In the pavilion that he sent to the exhibitions, the upper floor was detached to create a bigger space as a small community center. Right now, the second experimental module of the project is in last step of finishing in Phú Xuyên. The layout of the space is a bit different than the module in Quốc Oai before, but this module is especially for residents, just for living, and especially for the people who is living in Mekong Delta. As we know, as Mekong Delta is right now in the danger that we are gonna lose 30% of the land in the next 25 years because of the sea level rising. And also with a lot of problem with the Wasser Dam along the Mekong Delta, which could be able to create like easy little flood whenever the Wasser Dam is open. So we are facing a lot of problem all around this delta, and it's always the question how we could be able to help the people to save their house, their life, their properties during the climate disaster. And especially this house is right now experimental, and before the trip to Vienna, he was successfully experienced this module for a trial. We really tried to create this module and put it over the water and to see if this how it really function and really could be able to float on the water for really long time enough. Not only thinking about the solution to disaster response, he was also thinking about many different social perspectives, which he believed that architecture would help. One of the topic is finding a solution to improve the life for poor children from rural, especially the mountainous village in Vietnam, the area which is still really undeveloped and poor infrastructure. And toigetation is such a project. Toigetation is the word that is combined from toilet and vegetation. This is quite funny, but this is a series of the project, the targeting on supplying this philosophical imperative to poor children. This project is built in Cao Bang, is a mountainous province 200 kilometers away from the north of Hanoi. In those areas, the children in this area, sometimes they even have to climb up the mountain, go through many, many hills for 4 hours to go to school, crossing also the stream on the mountain. So that's why they usually stay in the boarding school, because it takes so much time and also really dangerous for them to go to school every day. And in the first toigetation in Cao Bang, on this small plan, there is one toilet and one shower for each gender. Outside is a washing basin for the children in the boarding school. All around is a vegetation, also the small farming that is could try to save the water and also recycle the water which is using there somehow for the garden around. The energy and water are taking the benefit as much as possible from the nature, collecting raining water, solar energy, recycle the tap water. Tap water in those mountainous province is a big problem because at the many places in the mountainous province in Vietnam, they didn't even have the water supply, that they really have to use the water come from nature, or they have to do the filter for the groundwater, that they'd have to dig really deep into the soil to be able to get it. And we got a lot of help from children, the teacher, and the villager as well. The main material for this project are the local material, which could easily found in the area. In this case, it's a combination of bamboo and brick, as we said before. Bamboo is like the strain of Vietnamese people. This project is also based on the help of the social. It's not only just about a project that is designed for social, but also a project that is made by social. The left concrete pipe were recycled to make the wash basin. The project was complete in 2014. This is the second toigetation in Dien Bien, which is twice bigger than the project in Cao Bang before. In this project, we also had to adapt the design to many medical hygienical benchmarks in Vietnam by the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Health. This project was complete in 2016. The education is the foundation of a developed society. Mentioning to this point, we still have one more hierarchy of Maslow, which he also wanted to talk about, is the social needs. To develop a part of eco-friendly and connecting people to the common space inside a stuffy urban space. He was trying to focusing on to design an urban concept of no door, no boundary, and no limit. The urban space are for everyone. He wanted to talk more about the detail of the project as shaped was complete in 2018. The S is stand for the material from stone scaffolding. This building, located near the National Heritage Cam Chong, which is in jeopardy of being eliminated due to the case of rampantly limestone mining around. Therefore, he came up to the idea of recycle the left material in the local area, the broken stone, the scaffolding, to create a free plan with a friendly living atmosphere. The design was inspired from the form of the cloud and mountain. The heavy, strong stone walls on the ground are carrying on the light structure of the house on the first floor, floating like a cloud with vegetations all over the space. The message of all the architecture that we have been showing today, the Mr. Doan wanted to give a message that the architecture need to be responsible with natural environment and social culture environment, especially giving the children a better future. Thank you so much. And on behalf of Mr. Doan, thank you so much for the organizations that we could be able to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Don Tanha and Fit Fong, for this very vital presentation and great presentation. The projects have shown how architecture can connect outer and inner space and make room for agriculture as an inherent part of housing. We will have the opportunity to ask questions regarding these projects in the final discussion and continue with our next guest, which is Katharina Urbanek from Studio Urbanek in Vienna. Studio Urbanek builds, researches, and teaches, and by that the studio is making use of the fertile exchange between theory and practice. The settlement Am Heuberg was built according to plans by Adolf Loos as part of the Viennese settlers movement. Studio Urbanek extended one house with an annex and reorganized the interior to allow circulation on both levels. At Vienna's Nordbahnhof site, Katharina Urbanek created in collaboration with Benny Eder and Theresa Krenn a communal living project. The multitude of communal and open spaces, such as a garden, music studio, terrace, and balconies, have a high value and allow the residents to move generously through their spaces. Katharina Urbanek's architecture is committed to new spatial concepts in housing and therefore provides another important contribution to the symposium. We are very happy to welcome you here at the Villa Bear. A big applause for Katharina Urbanek. Katharina, the stage is yours.
Okay, so thank you very much for the nice introduction and the invitation to speak here at this special and beautiful place. And also thanks to my colleagues that presented their inspiring projects before me. I will now take you back to Vienna and very close somehow also to this place and what you've seen earlier today, the Werkbundsiedlung. I'm going to present two rather recent projects of mine. Both are housing projects, but with very different context, socially, historically, spatially. As Lena already said, Heuberg House is a conversion project of a row house of the 1920s, and that is very much linked somehow to Josef Frank and what we've heard about him before. And the second is this community housing project, Kohlenrutsche, and I think it tries to somehow transform certain aspects that we were also discussing into urban development area and into an 8-story building. So Heuberg, it's a neighborhood with tiny row houses on narrow streets on a hillside, as already the name indicates. It's located, here at this white circle in the 17th district in the west of Vienna. We are in this light circle in Villabert. So it's on the foothills of the most eastern parts of the Alps, actually, where the Viennese woods come into the city of Vienna. So to me, this project was very special and interesting because it has a certain ambiguity in itself. It's on one hand, it's a very simple, original structure, a very simple house of just 2 stories, brick walls, wooden ceilings with beams, but a flat roof. And on the other hand, it's also something like a historic monument, not quite as much as the Werkbundsiedlung, but still in this context. So, as it was already said, this Heuberg-Siedlung was one of the first settlements that was realized by the Vienna's settlers or settlement movement in the early 1920s. As Maria has already spoken about, this was like this bottom-up grassroots movement, being born out of need and catastrophe, actually, during the First World War and right afterwards. And in the early 1920s, this movement was formalized and supported by the Red Vienna government that was in charge after the first elections. So at that point, also Adolf Loos became the chief architect of the Department for Settlements, and he was also responsible for the master plan of Heuberg-Siedlung, as we see it here, together with his assistant Margarete Schütte-Lihotzky at that point. What was special, and also that was already mentioned, is that the inhabitants or the future inhabitants of these houses, they had to provide 3,000 working hours to be able to later move into one of these houses that were afterwards given away in a lottery, so that you didn't know which house you're actually going to live in. And this was also a reason why the material and also the construction methods used, they were very kind of simple, down-to-earth basics, so that also more or less unskilled workers, even though a lot of them actually came from craftsmanship, were able to use these wooden beams, bricks, and also like the dimensions of the houses with low ceilings and so on. They were all in a manner that it was not that easy, not that hard to build. I have to take a sip. So Adolf Loos' famous project, Haus mit einer Mauer, a house with one wall, it was also realized in that Heuberg settlement in 8 houses. The house that I was working on was not one of these houses. It was from another not so well-known architect, Hans Uwoditsch. But what I wanted to point out here on the right-hand side is that already also in Loos's plans, the garden, like these long, narrow, stretched-out vegetable gardens, they really became part of the architectural planning, and this is really true for like all the houses in this neighborhood. Schütte-Lihotzky and Adolf Loos invited around 15 architects. It's not so known actually who this exact list of names, but they invited these 15 architects to contribute their own designs in various houses. So it's altogether, I think, 169 houses or so of these different architects. And it was also meant as some kind of educating settlement that could be like a model or a prototype for further settlements. This strong connection to the garden, which was like this mean of self-supply, is also found in this house that was actually the basic of our. So if you see it here in the back side of the house, in the ground floor, here's the garden. There was a stable for like small animals, and there was something like a room that's called Spüle, which is a room for food processing of everything that's produced in the garden. And all these houses actually also had, like in the terraced narrow gardens, they had this compost area where the biological waste, both of like animals, but cooking and also human waste, went back into like this circle that connected somehow the house with the garden. So when I was asked to do a project there, the house was has of course changed a bit. So the stable and this processing room, they were turned into a kitchen and a bathroom at some point, but there was no larger extension towards the garden made like in other houses. There has been a thermal insulation. I've just shown it here before, just a few years before we did the project. Like the whole row of the houses got this thermal insulation on the street side. There was a young family living, or is still a young family living there, that are the great-great-grandchildren, I think, of the settlers. So it's still the same family using this house over really a lot of generations. And I just learned yesterday that at some point in the 1940s or something, there were like 3 generations and 6 people living in this house as well, which has had like 70 square meters. Originally, it has now 100 square meters, so it's still a small house, but big enough for living for a family. And it is still, which is also interesting, it's still owned by the original cooperative. So it's not private property, but it still belongs to this true kind of cooperative. So what we did is adding this like 2-story annex towards the garden. And the second big thing that we did is we changed the living and the sleeping areas so that at the more intimate ground floor we have the private rooms, and we lifted the living upstairs, also contributing to like other ideas of connection to the outside and to the garden as they were like 100 years ago. So living with a view and with a lot of light, but maybe less direct contact to the ground. But this new like definition of connection to the garden, I think you can already experience when you enter this house as it is now. You can already somehow look through the house, and this was a condition that was actually really blocked in the way that it was used before with the kitchen and the bathroom in the back. So we introduced this linear space that is connecting the front and the back side of the house. And next to that, it was just a few like walls and additional elements that allow for this kind of circular movement in both levels. And I think from the moment that you're actually entering the house, you already experience quite a different space than before when you had this like small box-like spaces. And now it's more something like this one connected fluid space that creates these views and light, and also offers a lot of possibilities for different kinds of movements through the house. As you see the plan, it's rather simple actually. So it's more that we took away things than putting a lot of elements in. And I think this is also true like for the material approach that we had. We wanted to show what this house really is and also how it was made maybe. So we were stripping off a lot, for example, from these wooden beams here on top. We just took off the plaster and hundreds of holes of nails that were at some point put in from somebody got visible. And we were just sandblasting them and leaving them more or less like they are. And similar, we operated with this wall, which was originally the exterior wall and which is now like an interior wall between the old and the new space. We took off the plaster and made this special like masonry bond visible that was used. It was like a very efficient and economic way to put the bricks together, having 2 layers of brick and a layer of air in between, and it was called like the rat trap masonry bond. So obviously it was somehow dangerous for rats in between. And here in the new part, we tried to use similarly comprehensive materials as in the old. So we have plywood walls in the upper floor, and in the ground floor we have kalksandstein masonry and wooden ceilings. And as soon as you somehow exit on the first floor, you have this kind of gorgeous view over like the garden landscape of Heuberg, which is special somehow, but also over the whole city, or a lot of parts of the city. So this is really an asset of the whole area there. And from the outside, you really see this kind of change of functions, like the extroverted upper floor, and then this introverted and kind of cozy ground floor with the private rooms. In the private rooms, we introduced certain elements, like a curtain or sliding walls and so on, that allow for different conditions of privacy and different interpretations of use. I will just show here, for example, this space. It can either be the hallway to the back of the house, to the garden, or it can be part of the sleeping room that is just like the same space, just divided by the curtain. Similar here, like the gray-green door you see on the left-hand side, it can either like open up for providing a bigger bathroom, or it can be closed and like creating this connecting space between the 2 rooms in the ground floor. So I think this, this ambition somehow to create a generous space, or a generous flowing space somehow within a small volume, that's something that we can discuss maybe in if it has something to do with Josef Frank and these ideas from the 1920s. And I think also like the adaptability, that it's not a perfect condition, but the conditions can change due to like the daily life of the users. I think that's something very like important to me, and also that it doesn't stop this daily life at the exterior wall of your building, but that architecture can and should like provide a lot of different possibilities of transition between the inside and the outside and to the surroundings. So, and here it's the surroundings of Heuberg, but I think also in the next project that I'm going to show now, it's similar topics, but of course in a completely different setting. So Kohlenrutsche is it's also a different area. It's a community housing project initiated by a group of people that are now living there, and it found its place in the area of Nordbahnhof, which is one of the biggest inner city development areas in Vienna. So it's very centrally located, and it's an attractive location to live, somehow close to the Danube and the Danube Canal as well, and also like the big park of the Prater. And this train station used to be historically like the main train station for the transport of coal into the city of Vienna from northeastern regions of the monarchy. This is also why the project has the coal in its name. And after the Second World War, the train station gradually lost its function and more turned into this kind of natural landscape until from the 1990s on, it was developed in this kind of high-density urban development area. And I think by 2026, like this transformation project should be somehow finished, and 20,000 new inhabitants will be finding their home there. And Kohlenrutsche is one of those, of course. So as I said, we're this kind of community project that I was involved in different roles as one of the project initiators, one of the planning architects together with my former office, Studio OEK, but also as now I'm a resident there, and therefore also like a member of the association of residents. So we are organized in this kind of association to rent the whole house from a larger cooperative or developer. We're not owning it. This process took about 5 years, similar to the French project from 2014 to 2015, together with a group. So it was a participatory planning process. And today we are a group living in this house of 100 people, around 65 adults and 35 children. And finally, in 2019, we moved into this house, which is now one part of this new, completely new urban fabric. We want to be kind of an active part in this, or play an active role in these surroundings, since we're believing that the house is a great resource, both like the group of 100 people, but also the house itself with all its spaces, then that can contribute to, makes a lot of things possible, not only for the people living in the house, but also for the immediate or also wider neighborhood. This kind of interaction with the surrounding space and with the neighborhood was already important to us in the planning process and in the conceptualization of the project that we were developing together with the group. So we see it in like early conceptual drawings already, but also in the daily life today we experience that there's a lot actually happening on the borders of the house and around the house as well. This is the ground floor, and I think it shows this kind of permeability, both like spatially but also programmatically very, very well. We have these 3 like large entrances to the house, but we have a lot of different other doors and possibilities where you can enter and cross and exit and so on. And programmatically, we are in this like nice situation that next to the 33 apartments that the house is offering, we're also having 750 square meters of common area, which is quite a lot, and which is only like possible due to the subsidization system of the city of Vienna. And the trade-off is that we only have 2 parking places in the garage. So this is somehow where the money comes from in the end. And we see like one large area of shared spaces here in the ground floor. We will see some images later, and we also have 2 like commercial spaces here. One IT office that is focusing on social enterprises, and in the back we have like a kindergarten daycare for 15 children, which is run by one inhabitant of the house, but it's open for like all children around. Yeah, and we understand somehow the architecture of this house as some kind of background or robust background for which is open for appropriation and for interpretation and use, and which even gets better somehow during the years of usage. And robustness, I don't only mean like good details and good materials, but also a certain like subtle beauty that somehow also doesn't get lost if things are changed a bit. And this kind of interface to the city, or this background that the architecture is promising somehow, it's not only restricted to the ground floor as we've seen in the plan before, but also like in different levels of the city. We see here now an open staircase that is leading down to a patio, where we have another set of common rooms, like a workshop and a space for teenagers and musicians. But if we look at this section, the house tries also to open up in the upper levels. First, there's like narrow balconies that are wrapped around the house, but there are also these carved in like double-height lodges that are somehow like really connecting the house a lot to the outside, but also providing views to the outside, but also allowing somehow for other people in the surroundings to look into our house and to see somehow community life taking place, or people using their balconies. So these narrow balconies, they're around, like they're all wrapped around the building and potentially allow for a movement all around the house. Since there are no partitions given, like from the architects at least, and people are actually using it also like that they somehow negotiate with the neighbors if they put plants there or not, if you can walk to the neighbor or not. So this is, for us, really gives a lot of luxury to every room in the house, to have this really direct connection to outside. And it's for us, it's really this kind of very condensed line of garden around the houses. The second element are these two-sided lodges that were especially given like quality to the apartments that are a little bit lower in the house, to create like extra space that they are using, these kind of micro communities that are arranged somehow like 4 or 5, 6 apartments somehow around these lodges, but also providing an extra direction of light coming into these apartments. And they're also providing light for the interior staircases. Like the third level of free spaces that we share in the house are like 2 roof terraces and the roof garden that is of real soil, and providing conditions for apricot trees and poppy flowers. And next to all these like free spaces or bigger free spaces, we always have shared spaces like this one. We call it the Gartenzimmer, the garden room, where there's a small kitchen and we have, I don't know, either meetings or parties or breakfast or whatever. And this connection, like the sequence of spaces, of outdoor and indoor shared spaces, it's also, of course, connected to the circulation system. And here we decided consciously, like on 2 very compact staircases, to allow really for like good positioning of the apartments around these staircases. But it was very important for us that they're connected both in the ground floor and in the floor of the roof terrace, to create this circular movement that doesn't lead to any dead ends. So they are naturally lit, and here you see like this ground floor connection, and here you see the connection in the level of the 5th floor of the rooftop of the roof garden, and these connections are already kind of spaces of themselves. You were mentioning like they're only like the circulation spaces that should create like community life. I think they're really kind of open for interpretation and use additional to these other spaces. And this openness for interpretation, it's also something that we can see in these main common spaces in the ground floor. In the back, you see the Kinderspielraum, children's playroom. In the middle, you see the community kitchen, and in the front, the large like multifunctional space that we use for bigger gatherings, or we're also renting these spaces out to initiatives and groups of the surroundings for a very low price. And these sliding walls and sliding doors that we see here, they allow these different conditions of either it's something that's used by the community of the house, or it's like becoming something like a public space with an external entrance. Yeah, and now it's like 3 years ago that the group has moved into the house, and most of the common spaces, they were equipped by like working groups around these spaces. And I just show you some snapshots of the life, how it is now. This is this children's playroom, obviously at some winter evening. And this is a picture of one of the roof terrace and on the 8th floor, actually, where in the back you see here a large co-working space that is open for everyone all the time. Or this patio that we saw the stairs before, that is connected to the workshop inside, and here some people are doing the table legs for the tables in the co-working space in the upper floor. Or here, the same space during a hot summer day, where it's a really nice thing to have like a hole in the earth with plants, and it's really like refreshing somehow, especially with ice cream. And one other thing that's like another example of this, like how this interface is actually really active and activated, is like it's called the Fenster Project, of a group of people of the house that are doing regular poster installations or curating actually poster exhibitions by other artists that are invited to do this kind of temporary projects there, and they're inviting the neighborhood for the opening and discussions of these exhibitions. But of course, the house also provides the resource for like larger events, like a summer party we had sometimes during Corona break. And I just want to say a few words on the on the apartments themselves. So the structural plan of the house is actually very simple. There are these two load-bearing cores, and then the load-bearing outer walls, and the shaft. The position of the shafts is fixed, but the rest is really open and very flexible, and we don't see it in that way that actually that the flexibility was already used to its 100%, but we rather think of a long-term flexibility in the whole lifespan of this building. So we were actually more operating with the standardization of floor plans, rather thinking of an easier possibility to swap apartments and to integrate user changes in our group. And they were organized around this course to have two corner apartments and two-sided apartments, providing light from two sides almost for every apartment. And on the basis of these kind of standard apartments, of course, individualization also was possible during the participation process. So, for example, this floor plan is of a 95 square meter standard apartment with 3 rooms. And I quite like this floor plan because it somehow repeats this idea of the circular movement that we've seen in the balconies and also in the circulation system on the scale of the apartment itself. And it's again these sliding doors that somehow provide these different conditions and possibilities somehow of privacy. And we see, of course, that all these corner rooms, they have a huge kind of quality and good connection to the outside, especially, I mean, this is now 3 years later much greener than it was when these photos were taken. So the garden is really somehow wrapping around the building. And within the system of the standard apartments, there are certain implements where special forms of living are also provided. I'm just showing 2 of them now, a micro apartment of 32 square meters. I think it's the smallest, or the largest apartment that's in the house. It's a project itself somehow. It's an inclusive shared apartment where 5 young adults with Down syndrome are living together with 5 young adults somehow in an inclusive way, and it's not assisted living, that's somehow important, but inclusive. Yeah, and I think to me Kohlenrutsche is somehow, or what I wanted to show is this connection of a community with its architecture, and that the house is really providing a high quality of life to every inhabitant individually, but also to the group as a whole. And I think that, of course, we're having nice apartments with good quality and so on, but then there's all this world that you can enter when you leave your own apartment. And this is really providing a lot of freedom. You were talking about the children, so children are really using the whole house, in the house and around the house. And this also, of course, gives a lot of freedom to their parents as well, as I can somehow testify. Yeah, and I think these are somehow, of course, not every project can be a community project, which also needs a lot of personal researches of the inhabitants. But still, I think that some of these aspects are really crucial, and yeah, assets that we have to strive for when we think about multi-story housing in a dense urban environment. Thank you.
Hello, Christoph. Due to unfortunate circumstances, Christophe Hutin, our next lecturer, had to cancel his personal coming to Vienna only yesterday. But we are very happy, Christoph, that despite all, you are with us now and will give your lecture. Christophe Hutin is architect, filmmaker, teacher, of course, based in Bordeaux. Christophe Hutin's conception of architecture was very much formed by his experience and work in the townships and self-built settlements of Soweto, Johannesburg. For all the simplicity and scarcity of these self-built houses, Christophe was fascinated by the empowerment and freedom of the people in the settlements to freely shape their own living environment. This is the very recommendable book and very personally written book by Christophe about his experience in South Africa, learning from Soweto, building freely. After returning to France, Christophe Hutin was searching for kindred spirits, verwandte Seelen, and found them in the architects Lacaton Vassal, sharing with Jean-Philippe Vassal the African experience. Together with Anne Lacaton, Jean-Philippe Vassal, and Frédéric Druot, Christophe Hutin was awarded the Mies van der Rohe Prize 2019 for their meanwhile famous conversion of the 1960s social housing blocks in Bordeaux. Christophe Hutin was the curator of the French pavilion at the Venice Architecture Biennial in 2021, where he presented Communities at Work, namely examples of communities at work in France, the USA, South Africa, and appropriately for our panel from Vietnam. As Christophe Hutin says, housing is a universal issue. Thank you, Christophe, for being here.
First of all, thanks to you for the invitation. And is the microphone is working?
Yes, it is.
So thanks a lot for inviting me, and I have to apologize because I wanted to be with you personally, to meet you and to share this moment. And I have to change my plan, and we have to improvise a little bit. So I'm going to talk about the improvisation. So it's a good transition. So let me share my screen to start. Is everything okay on your side?
Yes,
okay.
Is.
Okay. So thank you, Maria, for your introduction, and so I will be back to Soweto to explain you why this experience was very important for me. I took this picture in 1994 during the first free election in South Africa, when Nelson Mandela was elected. We are in Soweto, and I engaged myself. I was 18 years old. I didn't know what to do in my life. I was young and crazy. And so I moved to South Africa, and I worked for the ANC, the political party of Nelson Mandela. And I was host in Soweto. I was living in a house with some colleagues. We were 7 in a small house. And during the weekend, on Saturday night, I was invited because I was the stranger in this environment. So I was invited for all the weddings. And so I was partying a lot on Saturday night. And on Sunday morning, you have to build a house for the young couple who get married. And so you go on the side of the road and you buy panels, and you have to build a house. So you've got the price of the house, which is you put out a 0 and you've got the price, and you've got the typology also. And you find a space, an empty space, and during the afternoon, in 2 or 3 hours, you build a house, and after you put the furniture, and after you get the drinks all together, and you build a house in one afternoon, and after these young people, they create their home. So this was for me my definition of architecture. I thought at that time that this is architecture. So after of course, I went back to France. I did my academic study, But this experience is very strong for me, and it still keep going me on what I'm doing. After that, I had a research program in France, and in 2004, I went back to Soweto to see what was the condition and access of housing in the township. So I was documenting and making an inventory of all the houses and the way the people, the process of making houses. And what I have learned in this context is the people with small means, they are able to create a house, and they are able to create the condition of the dignity and with a lot of freedom. And you see how clean it is and how the people are proud of the house, which is their home. So for me, it's the meeting between the architecture and the project of life of the people. After that, I'm gonna show you different projects that I'm doing, and just to continue and develop also the topics of the Josef Frank works. So this project is in the suburbs of Bordeaux. It's called Plateau. It's like creating new floor where you can create your own house with the house that you want to have, and you can have also a garden. So it's also to create in the social housing policy the condition of freedom that we don't have, because everything is standard and everything is a little bit narrow on my point of view. So we did the first try on this project. The first try was this one. We call it Plateau 1, and we could try a lot of different experimentation with the technically, of course, and also with about the garden and the access. So this is the way we build the structure, and after you can have the garden in all the floors of the building, and the building became when the inhabitants arrive, the building becomes very alive, because all the gardening and the action of the people is very important. For me, I will develop later, but for me, living is an action, and the people are transforming in the daily use the architecture to make it better, to make it more suitable, more gentle for themselves and for the life they want to have. So this apartment is a social housing apartment. It was very large it's not the standard that we are used in France. It's larger, more larger than the standard, and it allows the people also to arrange the apartment in the way and to set up in the way they want. So you can have a pool, you can have a bicycle, and you can have also in your garden. This example, for example, this apartment is on the second floor, and you can see that you can have the same quality in the same situation than in a house, where you can go out having a garden and be related to the climate and the surrounding. I have to say a few words about the project you mentioned, Maria, with Anne, Jean-Philippe, and Frédéric. We did a very long urban study in Bordeaux during 5 years, and at the end we did a case study. The case study was to transform 3 buildings of this modern neighborhood in Bordeaux. It's called Grand Parc, and this is the building, is the 2 that you can see, and one little one on the right. These buildings were supposed to be demolished, because in France we I don't know why, but when we are talking about urban regeneration, we always demolish, which is a pity, and we are fighting against that. And I can understand, because as a urban planner or the politician, the people in charge of the urban planning, they always look at the condition of life and the housing from a very long distance. You can be very high in the sky, or you can be very far from the situation. For example, if you look at this building, the mayor of Bordeaux was saying, this building is ugly, we have to demolish. Our approach is completely different. You have to start from inside. You have to enter all the apartment. And it's not a joke, I really did it. It's 530 units. And I went into all the apartment, because it's part of my work. I consider it is normal to do that. So when you go inside the apartment, your experience is completely different. For For example, this is the family. This is the way they are living from the 60 in this apartment. So it's all the story of their life, all the affective story they can have in the apartment, the happiness, the sadness, you know, baby are coming, people are dying. This is the life, and the people, they got their own story in the building. And in social housing, usually you are not allowed to write your personal story. For example, you can come from Morocco, you can see with the furniture and the way you organize your space, you can see where you are coming from, and it's dealing with your own culture. So for me, it's very important. And in this project, we wanted to give more space, to give more capacity to the people to continue to develop the daily life and their personal relationship with the apartment and the housing. So what we have done, it's, I can say simple, but it's not, but we can say that. It's we put out the facade, the windows, and we create a new prefab concrete floor to increase the floor of the apartment. In fact, at the end, you transform one apartment and you do it 530 times. But you have to do it one apartment very carefully with a lot of attention to the people. And after you can multiply and go to 530 units. The construction was done in with the people inside. You can see the Cray is working with a prefab floor on the left. And the people are living in the apartment during the construction time, which is also very important because we don't remove the people because the project is done for them. This is an example of a small apartment. It's a 2-bedroom apartment typology, and the area of the apartment is 58 square meter. And with the project, you turn to more than 120 square meter of floor. And the winter garden you can have that you add to the apartment allow the people to organize the life, the furniture, the daily life, and the strategy of the daily use in the way they want, and also they are related also to the surrounding differently. I can say also, which is very important, is that you can also move into this apartment now, like in a house. You can go through the outside. From the winter garden, you can move to all the rooms. This is an example of a winter garden, and you can see that Jean-Yves, it was just after we delivered the winter garden. Now this winter garden is full of plants, and the relation between the apartment and the environment is completely different. You can feel the climate very precisely. You can feel the air, the wind, the light, the sun is coming inside the apartment. You can control it, you can regulate, and you can be the actor of your comfort in the apartment. And you are clearly in relation with the natural element. This was before, and this was after the transformation. Another example of when the life is coming, and it's very dense, and it's done for that. So what I can say about this project is it is a new structure that we provide, and it's the meeting between the skill of the architect and the performance of the people. The structure is very open, is not determined in terms of function or space. It's completely free for the people to invent the life they want to have in this apartment. I'm going to go to Hanoi, to Mr. Douane, to make a joke to Mr. Douane, because when I traveled to Vietnam, I discovered that this process was done in the suburbs of Hanoi during 40 years on the KTT building. The people, they are too narrow inside the apartment, coming from the conception of the typology of this apartment. They are coming from East Germany in the 60s. And so the people start to create new rooms on the facade and to plug new rooms on the facade. So in fact, they are doing the same process than us, but without architect, and they do it individually. So if you look at the picture, it's very impressive, because it's sometimes technically I'm still very impressed. This one was extended 2 times. So in terms of critical point of view, this research on this building in Hanoi is important for me because we did it in Bordeaux in a very institutional way. And in Hanoi, the people are doing it in a very individual way, very wild and free. So I think the both can learn from each other. So this thing makes me think about the question of the layout of the architecture. This is a music partition from a musician close to I don't remember the name, I'm sorry. You know the open partition in music, John Cage, sorry. So this musician was close to John Cage, and John Cage in music, he did invent the open partition. So I'm going to talk about the music because maybe it can be more clear than in architecture. You know, in classic music, everything who is happening during the artwork, during this event, is written before on a partition. So imagine in architecture also when you are buying an apartment and when you get an apartment, sometimes the architect draw everything on the layout of the apartment. But the free jazz, the jazz musician in America, for political reason and empowerment reason, they decide to create a new way of making the music, which is the jazz, and it is improvised. So that means that it's not doing everything you want. It means that you're having a very simple structure who allow the people to perform and to play in the way they want all together. So that means that what is happening during the performance is not totally written before. So this is what I want to do in architecture. So this is me and my crew and then some inhabitants in a neighborhood called Butre, Mérignac-Butre, is close to the Bordeaux airport. It's we call it cité d'urgence, emergency city. It was done in the 60s and 70s for the people back to the decolonization of France in Algeria, etc. So the houses was done. It was a temporary project for the people, and they were supposed to get a social housing after through the process of integration in the French society. The problem is on that place, on that site, the people are there for 3 generations and they never moved from the houses. So the houses were delivered unfinished, and the people, they did transform all the houses a lot. And so when I won the competition, I proposed to the owner of the site, it's 93 houses, I proposed them to say, why not considering that from 50 years, the project is already started and the people are maybe the best resource to do this project. So this is some pictures, some archives of the site you will see. So all these children now, they are old and I'm working with them. I know all of them. And this is a document about the project. So what is the houses in black? They are the official houses that the people are renting officially. And in red is all the construction that the people did to arrange and to manage that the house suit to the family situation. So like in South Africa, I'm working in the same way. And I want to be as close as I can to the people. What is very important for me, this is my neighbor because I'm using my office is in a house next door to her. And this is Madame Justino. This is Madame Nester and Madame Maya. This is the Zoawi family. This is Madame Giz. And what I'm trying to say, Castro family, is that in the urban planning is not fair for the people, and on my point of view, is not democratic, because all the people in the project that you are looking now, every person must count for one. Every family must count for one family. So you don't create a project for a neighborhood or for the city. You work for the people, and you have to work with them. You cannot avoid making the economy of the human issue when you do architecture. This is the construction I'm using to deal with them, because I need also some collective meetings and times to make the process. So we are using a chapiteau, and this is a meeting, and with the inhabitants. I'm going to give you some example to illustrate what I'm trying to say. This is the house of Madame Maya, and so she's renting the house on the left. I don't know if it's clear for you. Here is the house, and this is the house who is on the rental document, on the contract. And the husband was a bricklayer, and he built the second house in the garden here. And after, they took a space on the public space to create this vegetable garden, wonderful. And this is the entrance of the house, and this is an olive tree from Portugal, from the village where they are born. So you can demolish that. You have to consider that because this is the result and the story of the life of this family. And so I draw everything as a project, and for me, I'm working on a small piece of time in a very long process, long story. So for me, the architecture is a work in progress. And you know, now it's very fashion to talk about the participatory process. I don't feel comfortable with that because it's, for me, something is unclear with if you are using this method, because you know, in this situation, the people are participate from 50 years, transforming the place, making it better, and taking care of the architecture, in fact. See, this is the timeline of the of different houses. So you see this one, for example, it's a family. They've got now 3 children. They build one bedroom in the living room. They build another bedroom in the garden. And so the situation is not so good. So, for example, here we're going to create 2 new bedroom and organize the house differently. So this is all the timeline and the work in progress that we are trying to develop. This is a layout of the neighborhood, but is not so interesting. If you want to make project in a different way, you have to create your proper tool for that. So about the diagnostic on this project, we did a lot of diagrammatic system, and this one is a diagram with, for me, who can measure the state of the house, because you don't have to be idealistic. The situation of this neighborhood is very interesting because a lot of people had the capacity and the skill to build and to make self-construction and make it better. But a lot of people also doesn't have the skill and the means to make it better. So the result is that you're having it's very unequal in this neighborhood. So you can see the quality of this polygon, the quantity of the polygon show how the effort in terms of construction you have to do. So some houses are very okay, and some of them you have to make a lot of construction work to make it better. I don't have the time to develop, I'm sorry, but I'm sure you understand what I'm trying to do. And this is the mapping of all the houses with all the information we've got to be able to to provide the better answer to the people, and also to disturb them less as we can. In this diagram, for example, you can understand who are the houses who need more bedrooms, where you have to fix the bathroom, where you have to fix the kitchen. So it's very precise, and so you put the money where we need, and so after that we can provide the larger space and architecture to all of them, and fighting against the inequality, but not providing the minimum, trying to get the strategy to provide them the maximum of space and quality. This is some action, some picture about the process, just for you to understand. This is another mapping of the state of the house. This is an interesting mapping also, is the relationship between the people. So sometimes it's family, sometimes it's friend. So it's very important for us because the people are a strong resource in the project and we work together. So now we are part also of this mapping, the architects. I don't have the time to show you, but believe me that all the 93 houses and all the gardens are drawn completely. The landscape architect, we did like an inventory of all the plants and all the people, how they are able to cultivate the garden and what they can do. And so after that, we've got some greenhouse where the people can develop the plants from their personal garden. So after we can share the plants, and it's going to be the resource for the landscape project. I also invite a lot of specialists, very expert on different subjects. This one is one of the French permaculture expert, very famous. I love this person. Is Jean-Marie Lespinasse, and the man on the left is Mr. Sanchez, who is making a garden in the forest on the back of the house. So the house of this man is maybe 2 or 3 hectares in reality, not in the contract with the social housing, but in reality it's 2 or 3 hectares. And this is the kind of garden that we are developing with them and with the people. This is another one. Is Bourguignon is a scientist, very specialist on the life on the soil. So we are making like courses and lecture, but we do it on site, showing exactly what is in the soil to understand the life and the dynamic of the soil. This is the women's club. It's a dispositive, an action that we had to allow the women in the neighborhood to be visible and to be part of the project, because it was not in the culture of this neighborhood. And I cannot tell you what is happening because I'm not invited. We do also party with artistic event, very strong, and at the end, my concern is I want to bring back the architecture to the people. So when I've been when I was doing the exhibition, when I was curator of the French pavilion in Venice, some family of this neighborhood came with me to the Biennale to be part of the debate and of the event. This is the way I'm working. I will conclude with that. It's a small project that I did with a student. It's an experimental approach, very improvised. We were transforming an orphanage in Soweto, in Cape Town. And this is the daily meetings that you have with the people. And the democracy is very fresh in South Africa, and you cannot joke with that, because the people, they deserve it and they want it. So you have to explain every morning what you're going to do, what you are doing, and the people want to know exactly what is the content. And at the end, this is an example of the meeting of the skill of the architect and the performance of the people. Thank you.
I hope you heard the applause, Christoph. Thank you. We are just making a little, can you just stay with us for 1 minute? Because we,
yes, of course. No, I'm with you, don't worry.
Because then, please, Katharina and Duan, can you come and fit to the panel? And we are rearranging a little bit. So perhaps you can talk with each other. So we are in a private house, as you know, so we are improvising a little bit. Can you see us now, Christoph, as a panel or a part of the audience? Okay, at the panel, that's good, yeah. I will start just with asking you a question, and then we go on, and perhaps you get in a conversation. So, I mean, we are living in a system that focuses on adaptation and functioning, from kindergarten to school and to the working world. And you, in contrast, emphasize that the living situation, at least, should be a place where one is allowed to grow freely and should allow also non-conformity and freedom. I hope I got you right with that. And also you say that it's in building, housing, it's important not to separate the programming, the design, and the execution. Is all that, is this approach possible in social housing? Or what would you recommend? What's the, what are the most important things that should be followed? Because here in the audience are also people from the housing department in Vienna, so I guess it could be interesting to hear.
No, I can say, what I can say is this proposal to say that for me, a project of architecture is I say it again, is the meeting between the skill of the architecture and the performance of the people. You need the both. And, you know, sometimes from the functionalist approach and from the modern time, we draw everything in the housing, in a house. For example, in an apartment, if you go to the bedroom, the way the electric plug are done determine the way you have to put your bed in the bedroom. It's a small detail, it's a small example, but just to show you that it's for me, we have to find some processes where we can be more undeterminated in the way we plan the housing. So the people also they've got a space for the performance, for the life they want to have in the units, because everything is very standard, and now everything is very normative, so everything is going very close and more closer. So I think we have to invent what the musician done with the open partition. We have to invent an open architecture, maybe to I would say that maybe we don't have to finish the house, the housing project, and so it's very rude to say that for the people who are building. But you know, myself, I will never finish my house, because it's my way to be alive. Because I always something to do and to transform, and I'm sure you are like me. And so if I don't finish my house, I don't know why I have to finish the one for the others. So I propose to the people, get the space to finish your house and make it suitable for you, for your project of life.
Katharina, do you want to ask something? Because I was remembered also of your project, just asking the panel if you want to get in contact with Christoph after the lecture.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think I found your, like, this last project of the settlement that you're working on with these residents really special, and I thought, yeah, it's like a dream project to do so much research before you actually start to propose something. And of course, you're using the tools of the architect, so you're drawing the social relations and you're drawing the plans and so on. So this is, I think, something for us to make clear that this is of relevance and of importance, and I really share this kind of interest in the everyday, and that we should really value what is already there and what has been made by the inhabitants. And I think, I mean, in a new build project, you're somehow you have to think somehow in advance, no? How this openness and how this transformability somehow can already be provided in the architecture that you build. And I think, I mean, sliding doors and so on, that's just the very basic answer somehow. And of course there's much more, like these open structures that you're talking about. It's something that's not very, let's say, common in like Viennese, but I'm sure like European housing schemes. And yeah, I think when we're working on competitions, housing competitions, then it's almost, sometimes it feels like a very, very complicated puzzle that you have to put together in a nightmare, and you cannot even somehow conclude to fulfill like all these, like 13 square meters here, 2 square meters here, this has to be 4 meters broad and 3 meters long or so, like coming from the clients. So I'm also wondering how, like maybe you can tell us a little bit more about your client or so, no? How they were somehow interested, or how you could also convince the client that this is of importance and it is necessary to put also like your energy and your working hours into this kind of research, because I think this is maybe like something that we are sharing amongst the architects, but we cannot somehow translate to certain clients. Yeah.
Yeah, it's not easy. I must say, I would be honest. And what I have to say is that sometimes for a social housing company, they've got a lot of answer to give about the regulation, the financial aspect, with all the criteria of the one they've got, and sometimes you forget also that the reality is very complex. So you always want to have a standard and simple answer to a very complex situation. You know, this neighborhood I was talking about, the last one, it's the complexity it's unbelievable. I can spend 20 years to transform this neighborhood if I want, and it's what you need, in fact, to do a good work. But for the client, it's a social housing company. You are working in an office. You are very far from the situation of the people there. And so it's very difficult. So what I'm doing is not, I just tell you what the tools I'm using. I decide also to, I don't want to make more meetings in the office of the clients. So all the meetings are done on site. And so it's like an injection of reality that you need also to change also the attitude and the relationship that you have with the complexity and the place and the people. Because you can avoid the people when you are on site, and it's very good for the project, and you change the mind also a little bit of the people to be there.
Are there any questions in the audience, especially from social housing departments in Vienna? I think this is perhaps this was also a little bit provocative for you, because Christoph's sentence, in social housing you are not allowed to write your personal story. What do you say to such a remark?
Yeah. Could you tell us how in
sorry, just one moment, because Daniel is answering.
Yeah, okay, thank you very much. I think I will try to put the question, yeah, because of course what I like very much in your work is that you work very much with the existing housing stock, with existing structures. I think that is very important, and that will be even more important in the next 20 years perhaps. Of course, in new projects there are so many regulations, yeah, and these regulations are very limiting to the architects and also to the further inhabitants. But if you look at this from a historical point of view, we started in the beginning of the last century, yeah, with very unregulated housing situations, yeah, and this was not always in favor for the inhabitants. And then we started to bring more and more regulation to the housing and then to the social housing, yeah. And now we are perhaps at the point that we are in a kind of over-regulating, yeah, the housing or the living of these inhabitants or the tenants. And so I would be interested, do you see any way, yeah, to not to go back to this totally unregulated situations we had 100 years ago. But you have any idea how we can overcome this overregulation and move on to a more unregulated system? But this system has to ensure that there is a certain standard, that there is a certain standard provided. Yeah? Because to criticize the situation now is always very easy, yeah? But to sketch the path to the better future, I think this is the importance. This is important, and I think we should not only speak about our vision, what should be, but more how is the way to, or how we can come to this vision.
First of all, I will say that I do the distinction between three words in terms of regulation. You've got the law, you've got the rules, and now we've got the norms. And the problem in the construction system is that we are mixing the three of them. And so we consider that we are obliged to respect the three of them. For me, my point of view is that the law, you cannot discuss the law. So you cannot kill, you cannot rob. So the law is the law. The rules, you can negotiate. Otherwise, it's not the rules, because you have to transform the rules also with the society and to update the regulation system. And the norms, for me, it's like an advice. And sometimes in architecture, I feel like with the client and the regulation, the policy, we are expecting from an architect to show the means he's going to use to get to the objective, to the goal. And for me, I think we have to be more in the result approach. You have to show that you can reach the result with the way you want to reach the goal. I don't know if I'm clear. You know, for example, for medicine, you don't have to provide the result. Otherwise, you're not good, because people are dying. You are obliged to provide means. And in architecture now, we are obliged to provide means in regards to the norms. So I think if we can more focus on the result, it's better, because there's different possibility to reach the result. And for you, I don't know, sir, where you are from, I don't know you, I'm sorry, if you are from a social housing company, or if you are...
Daniel Glaser, he is from the Housing Research Department of Vienna.
Okay, so I give you an advice about the situation. For me, what is very limiting the process of housing is the distinction, the category of new and transformation. You know, if you want to transform a building, you will have a regulation and money completely different than if you create a new buildings. And I think this is a very strong limit about the way we have to work on the society today in regards to the topic that we are facing. You're right to say that maybe transforming existing building, it's a priority for me, because we don't need to create new building if we can provide the quantity with the existing situation. So transforming existing situation sometimes can provide like new housing. We can consider that it is new, but starting from the past. And the problem is the two systems are completely separated, and the money and the rules are not the same. And I think it's a big challenge to break this boundary.
Yeah. Any other question? There was a question in the back.
Thank you. I refer to the houses in South Africa. They seem to have very narrow doors. Now, I wonder I mean, is there any rules how wide the course should be? And how would the people put cupboards inside their houses?
Did you understand it, Christoph?
Not properly, no. I understand the doors are too narrow in the picture I showed.
Yeah, the doors are so narrow. How people manage to bring in the furniture or something? Yeah, and yeah. And if there are regulations, but I don't think there are.
No. Yes, you have to know, in terms of regulation, I have to tell you quickly that, this, during the apartheid, the people didn't choose the place they were staying. And it was not enough houses for the units for all the people during the apartheid. So the people start to make shacks, to make self-construction like the one I was documenting. And so the people, they were squatting the land to do that. When Mandela was elected, he recognized the right to the soil to these people, so he gave the plot. They did after the urban settlements. They did a layout, a urban layout, and after they give the plot to the people. So they work first on the regulation before to work on the house and the superstructure or the construction. So in terms of right, the people became owner of the plot and of the house, which is very important. And after that, they could transform the house and make it with bricks and to transform the house. And to answer about the door, you're right that maybe the door are a little bit narrow, but sometimes you must know that when it's windy, when you have big storm, some house can collapse, and after you build it again with another form, and you leave the furniture. So you build around the furniture. So technically, it's more easy.
Okay. Any more questions to Christoph? Because, then I would, if you want to join us a little bit more, Christoph, yeah, okay. I would like to ask Duan, I mean, after your lecture, I would like to know, what do you think, or from your perspective also in Asia, what does it do to the individual human when it loses the contact to earth or vegetation or nature? Because perhaps this sounds like everybody talks about that, but really with animals, there are farm animals, there are studies. What does it do with them if they are stapled? I mean, the problem is not the stapling, but not having any contact to nature. And with human beings, I don't know about such studies. What do you think? What does it do if you, or what should we do not to lose the contact? I don't know if there's a kind of social housing in Hanoi also. Can you? Fit, you also can answer, yeah, if you want. You can take part in the discussion, of course, yeah. It's nice to hear you talk also, your voice. Yeah.
Ở nhà ở xã hội thì ở Hà Nội thì có những cái nhà ở xã hội đấy, nhưng hầu hết về thực trạng nhà ở xã hội hiện tại ở Hà Nội thì nó chưa được như mong muốn. khi mà chính quyền đầu tư hoặc là những cái tổ chức họ đầu tư vào thì cái nhà ở xã hội đấy nó không được sử dụng một cách hiệu quả, hay nói cái khác là nó bị đầu cơ hoặc là nó bị một số tổ chức, một số cá nhân làm cho cái tính chất nhà ở xã hội đấy nó không đáp ứng đúng, hoặc nó không đến tay được đúng những người cần nó, những đối tượng mà có những cái thiếu hụt về kinh tế hoặc là những cái cơ hội tiếp cận với cả những ngôi nhà như thế. Khi mà nó không được đến đúng cái đối tượng đấy thì kiến trúc nó không còn là kiến trúc nữa, tức là kiến trúc nó không có đời sống. Thế thì chúng tôi đứng trước cái thực trạng đấy thì cũng có đề xuất một số các cái mẫu mà cái nhà nó làm sao nó dễ dàng hơn, nó tiếp cận với cả những cái đối tượng mà dễ bị tổn thương. Thì thông qua những cái đề xuất đấy thì hiện tại thì chúng tôi vẫn tự làm, cho nên là cái quy mô nó không được lớn. Thì hầu hết thì vẫn là những cái kiến trúc nó nhỏ lẻ với một cái thông điệp là làm sao để cho tất cả mọi người đều có thể có cái nhà ở, nhưng với một cái quy mô nhỏ hoặc với một cái kinh tế khiêm tốn thì họ cũng có những cái quyền tiếp cận về kiến trúc đẹp như nhau, như những người mà có những cái điều kiện lớn hơn. Đấy là những cái suy nghĩ của tôi về khi mà làm những cái ngôi nhà nhỏ dành cho những cái đối tượng dễ bị tổn thương.
So right now in Hanoi, we also have a lot of projects, the social housing project, but because of many problem in the background with the immobilien company or like some some loch in the law that many immobilien company could be able to take a really huge amount of those housing to make money out of this. So it's like, it's social housing, but it's not really come to the people who really like need those houses. And from all those problems, so we could never be able to get really enough money to really like investing in those projects. And so that's why like the architect is trying to create the project that has a lot of nature inside, but it's anyway like it's so hard to be able to really like get to the final point of the whole design because of so many economical commercial reason behind. And also another problem is because it would never be able to finish those kind of projects. So every project in the end doesn't really have a fully meaning of the social housing. Is anyway, it's reached to the commercial and normal housing anyway. Yeah, and he's trying to bring all. He's trying his best to be able to create his own architecture by creating some small module to be able to encouraging much more the social architecture, but it's still like he has to do everything on his own. So every module is still so small, and it's still like a questions how he could be able to really like encourage much more nature inside the housing by doing some small project, and also like waiting for the private customer to come to him and really like waiting for the project and waiting for the investor to really like interested in the topic, how that they really want to bring the nature inside their housing.
Yeah. I see. So it's more on the private basis. I just would like to ask if, as we all know, the overheating and the extinction of biodiversity is, we read it every day, we hear it every day, but it's still the case that these are our main topics. And should not the housing architecture, as the biggest mass of the urban fabric, should not the housing architecture be an important element to make the city greener? because this, we saw two examples from the 70s or so, so that you have also two flies on one stroke, that everybody has his or her green room, or I don't know, or other possibilities, because like the Viennese, important Viennese housing architect Victor Hufnagel, who we celebrate this year, he said 50 years ago the balcony and the loggia do not fulfill our demands anymore. We want terraces, we want gardens, we want atriums, and this is a patios. This is 50 years ago, and it's, yeah, the housing as the biggest mass should contribute to the greenery of the city, I think. I don't know what you think, what you say, or
maybe I can. I would like to add something. I mean, I think that in a lot of like recent projects, like in the housing production, in the like public housing production, like climate change, and so they're really in every brief you have to, in every project you have to somehow provide some possible answers how your project is somehow contributing to a better future. But at the same time, I think it's really a question, like first, how much do we still actually need to build? And I think, I mean, of course, Vienna is this capital city of social housing, and we're still producing social housing and so on, but at the same time, there's a lot of like free financed housing of some, I don't know, Australian bank fund or something happening somewhere in Vienna, and the apartments are being sold to some, I don't know, wherever international people that have apartments in 5 cities or something like that. And I think this is, I mean, this is also like producing a lot of CO2 and making use of all our resources. So I find it really like unfair. And I think this is something that, yeah, it has to stop at a certain point, because it's not bringing any, I mean, of course, it brings some money to the city as well and some jobs and so on, but it brings too many costs, I think. And I don't know, for the social housing, I mean, we're building so much, and maybe you can answer this question, Daniel, if Vienna is still growing in a way, in that sense, that we need to build that much and to seal more ground and so on. And of course, this is yeah, I'm in a problematic position, because I'm also taking part in this whole thing, like many other architects are, and also like the whole building industry and the cooperatives, and like it's a running system that it's of course not like no one is taking a break, and I'm just questioning myself, yeah, how much longer do we go in this direction, yeah, and do we need to go somehow, no, and yeah, I mean, another little detail is that a lot of new projects now, they're tending to go into the direction of wood construction, so creating less CO2 and having the CO2 in the building. But at the same time, we have to put a lot of concrete in the ground floor, like in the underground, to provide the parking spaces that are still needed somehow in the regulations. Of course, they are less than 10 years ago and 20 years ago, but we still have to produce them. And I don't know, like in our house, we only have these 2 parking spaces. We're living 5 minutes from the metro away, and I really don't understand why we should like sponsor, like why should society sponsor this any longer, yeah? Maybe you can answer or so.
Yeah, I think it's really important, and I think if you talk about climate change and climate adaptation and biodiversity, I think we cannot stop at the city border. I think this is important. And of course, okay. And I think we have to look at the city and the city region and the surrounding of the city, because our problem in Vienna is, yeah, if we stop new buildings or the construction of new social housing estates, perhaps, or the people will build these buildings somewhere else, in Lower Austria, in the surroundings of the city, and this is perhaps more makes more harm to the climate and is less CO2 neutral than a dense urban district like the Nordbahnhof, because the Nordbahnhof is a former, the Nordbahnhof Viertel is a former railway station, and the development of such a grey brownfield area is, I think, more efficient and in terms of use the resources in a very in a good way. Yeah, it's better to develop the city and to develop the Nordbahnhof than to have single family houses in the surroundings. And I think this is the problem, because if we now argue and discuss about more nature, more gardens, yeah, even more terraces, yeah, this is space consuming, yeah. This is perhaps not efficient, yeah. And I think we have to find or develop typologies that serves as well the need of the nature to the inhabitants, but also in a very, very efficient way, yeah. And because this idea everybody has its house with its own garden is nice, yeah, because you are very connected to the nature, but the nature is not only the human beings, the nature is more, yeah. And I think if we have dense settlements, dense cities, we give more space outside the cities to the nature that is not the human nature, but the animals and the flora and the fauna, yeah. And this is also important, yeah. And I think have really high quality green cities, but even cities and not a kind of urban sprawl. This is not the solution, I think.
Yeah, I think this really changes, that you have city and nature outside. I think this conception perhaps you could question and could ask what is really urban. Is urban still, because also cities will be, will have to offer biodiversity and you cannot say here's the city of stone and here is the Greenland, or I think this is past time. And the cities will more and more get important as places for animals also, and biodiversity and nature.
I think this is a very naive view, yeah? Because I think this is very important. With nature, I don't mean the monocultural cornfields in the surrounding, yeah? With nature, I really mean nature that is more or less untouched, yeah? And for biodiversity, this really untouched nature is very, very important. And we are very lucky in Austria because we have a lot of untouched nature because of these high mountains. But I think, of course, we have animals in the city. Of course, there is biodiversity. But this biodiversity is for sure not comparable with a biodiversity in a really forest, in the Amazonas. Yeah, this really... These are really important areas for the nature. Of course, we can make our cities more green, yeah, but the idea that a city is a kind of habitat for thousands or for millions of animals and so on, that I think this is not right.
But it's the case. In Berlin, for example, you find more, I don't know what animals, I don't remember especially, but certain kinds of birds and certain kinds of other animals you find more in the city than outside. So I think this concept of we have the stony city and we have then the green land. Yeah, there's a question in the back. Is past, and it's yeah.
Yes, it's okay. Hello, my name is Bojan Schnabel. I'm also working in the housing department for quite a lot of years now, and eventually I just share some consensual vision, because I don't see really a conflict. What I saw here in the different presentations, like from Vietnam, or from Bordeaux, or from South Africa, or from Vienna Heuberg, or from the second your housing unit I visited it once, so I personally know it. There's so much contextual from the societal point of view. I mean, you can't compare Soweto with the Bordeaux or Vienna, like the housing. You can't, I mean, the approach, it's the idea of sharing or participating. We share it with Soweto or Bordeaux, but the approaches are so much different and they're so much contextual. Even between Vienna, what Daniel mentioned, Vienna and Lower Austria, we all like nature, but the approaches are so contextual because the single housing building is by energetic means, for instance, much more harmful to nature and ecology than the condensed city. We know that. And so what, for instance, Vienna is doing now because Kurt is here, is for many years now developing a broad dialogue amongst all actors in housing, like architects, social housing units, private initiatives, as your ones, so to say, to develop a whole variety of solutions. So for instance, one of your projects, IBA project, is the Biotop City, isn't it? So this Biotop City is working on, really on lots of elements of ecological housing, means of bringing into housing the ecology again, or bringing climate issues into the housing in order to use all modern tools and ways of finding solutions, but it won't be the only solution. So we have a variety of approaches, so I invite you all to visit the IBA exhibition this year, which is really great. They have more than 100 projects are running currently in Vienna in order to find approaches. So for instance, you can't compare really social housing in Brussels, Paris, or France, which is meant for the poor and for the most vulnerable situations, while in Vienna we have subsidized housing where 75% of the inhabitants are suitable to use these subsidies. Even you, as an architect of a quite wealthy background, got subsidies for your housing. So our approach, the Viennese approach, is the basic philosophy. I think it's a revolutionary compared to France and elsewhere. Well, I used to live in Paris, that's why I dare to say, is that the social mixity is at the core. We have now, with the IBA, the aim and the challenge to find solutions on climate change, affordability. We have now this catastrophe in the Ukraine running on, and with the all ecological things. So there are lots of challenges we are trying to face and finding different solutions. And I found the issues in Vietnam so interesting, of your architecture, beautiful. I mean, I loved it. I just don't know how to implement a tropical climate here. We will have it now. So we're working on green facades. This is something completely new. It wasn't there 5 years ago. Or I worked on a project. We were in Simmering, which is in a suburb here. We were the first to put PV installations on municipal housing. Now it's standard. But the problem is that this standard, if you're refurbishing housing, you have historic buildings, the roof are completely cut in little pieces. So there are lots of reality checks to make. So I don't see really the conflict of the approaches. It's just that there are lots of solutions working on, and go to IBA and see what they're making.
Thank you, Bojan, for bringing us together again and for the public relations. I want to ask Katharina also, because I remember so well when we visited your Baugruppenprojekt that you said it's so fantastic, we can just let the children go free and the whole house and the whole block, and also the surrounding is their playground and their home. And you said the same in Werkbundsiedlung, which is a totally different typology, but you said also there the children just move, and movement is obviously a very important point also in developing from a children to an adult. You have to move and widen your radiance, your distance, and not be supervised, things like that. What is necessary to, you did it in your project, but would there be general advice that you could give? Or?
Yeah, I think partially it's true for the whole neighborhood, so it's really also like how traffic is organized. I think that's like the key issue somehow, that we don't have to be afraid of cars too much, so it's not just, it's really also on this urban and something very, let's say, stiff, or something like traffic planning that really can have an impact on that. And I was thinking about, when I had the discussion before, how much nature, like, do we need the terrace or the loggia or the garden or the patio or the forest or so? I really feel my children somehow and we have enough of nature in this house, even though there's no forest and no real like garden, yeah. So I think it's maybe not so much about, I think this freedom and movement and like generosity of space that you can actually approach and that you can use in different ways, and so it's actually, yeah, it's for me it's more that actually than really nature. And of course there are then plants, and then we see the bats at night and so on, and we have little birds with the Stieglitz with the red Bauch, yeah. And it's very nice to have that also in the city, and to have my children like seeing this in the 7th floor or something, yeah. And it makes us happy. But I think it's really this, this kind of fluidity of space, this like different layers or shells from your private space to the public space, like to the city space, where you can still, without a lot of cars, you can still really move freely, and to create all these kind of different qualities in between these spaces. I think this is really, I mean, any good architectural project, I think, should provide these kind of onion rings around your most private space, yeah. And I think this really creates a sense of freedom, but also being intimate and protected at the same time.
I think this brings you two, all three of you, together again. The word freedom. You use, for you it's very important, Christoph, you used it now, and you also in a different way, in a more spiritual way, and I think this connects the whole panel also very much to Josef Frank, and I was surprised how much you have in common, all four, so different as you are, with what Josef Frank was doing, saying, thinking. And I think with the word freedom, it's a good Schlusswort, last word. And thank you so much, Christoph. And goodbye to Bordeaux. I think you are in Bordeaux now. Yeah, okay. we will do the same now. Okay, thank you. Hope to see you soon in person.
Thank you, thanks a lot. Come on, you.
Ja, und danke noch an die Stadt Wien, die diese Veranstaltung möglich gemacht hat und jetzt auch ein Buffet, Essen und Trinken für alle möglich gemacht hat. Also im Sinn der sozialen, der sozialen Stadt. Dankeschön.